Chapter 126, The Third Raikage's Death. After Minato agreed with Ryo's plan, he asked him to go and wait for him at the camp's gate. Ryo understood that the two still had things to talk about, and he didn't want to get treated by their love anymore, so he nodded and left. Ryo went out of the tent, and summoned a small toad with summoning. He asked him to go to where the third Raikage was fighting Onaki and his troops and wait there. Once the third Raikage is doomed to die, the little toad could relieve himself and head for Mount Myaboku. A few minutes later, Minato and Ryo set off together. A few hours went by since they retreated, and the third Raikage hadn't followed the Cloud Ninjas yet. A became really anxious and sent ninjas to check on the third Raikage's state. What he didn't expect was that those ninjas were intercepted and killed by Ryo and Minato, who had made an ambush earlier. Ryo didn't want A to know about the third Raikage's state. If A would send enough force to rescue the Raikage, Ryo's operation would fail completely. Ryo's plan was to drag things out as much as he could. When he and Minato couldn't do that anymore, it would fall on their behalf to face the Cloud's forces for enough time. Just like in the manga, the third Raikage was able to withstand the attacks of 10,000 ninjas for nearly 3 days. Under the endless stream of attacks from the rock ninjas, he used up his physical strength and chakra, which made it difficult for him to maintain the lightning chakra mode. Minato and Ryo intercepted over 100 men sent out by A to investigate. Whenever he would send out a team, they would kill them. Over the course of 3 days, A actually sent out 7 waves of ninjas in succession, but none of them came back. It was clear to him that someone was concealing the state of the third Raikage. He was furious, and finally decided to go in person. Being the village's main defense, everyone was against it, but he still left the village alone. For him, this wasn't just his village's cage. This was his father, of whom he heard no news in 3 days. He knew that he might not get to reach him alive, but that didn't keep him from going. In the worst of scenarios, he had to pay respect to his father's death and bring back his body. Minato initially intended on blocking his way himself, but Ryo proposed that he should have his chance at stopping him. In fact, Ryo had always been very interested in the Cloud's lightning chakra mode. Unfortunately, all the users he met so far were much weaker than him. Facing A was a perfect opportunity to find a worthy opponent using the mode. Minato already had 2 encounters with A, and he had good understanding of his power and level. He estimated that Ryo should be able to cope with him, so accepted to give the task to Ryo. Soon after A left his village, 10 kilometers away from it, he reached a part of the jungle where Ryo was hiding and concealing his chakra. Ryo entered the lightning chakra mode, leaving the ice scalpel at his spot, and holding another one in his left hand. He immediately flickered at his fastest speed in front of A and weaved his scalpel across his neck. A, whose throat was being targeted by Ryo, turned into what seemed like a thunderbolt and disappeared, just to reappear again and throw a lightning chakra-clad punch that was so strong, it penetrated right through Ryo's heart. Luckily for Ryo, he was in his ice elementization state. While the punch didn't inflict any substantial damage to him, it still scared the cold sweat out of him. With ice, Ryo teleported back to his initial spot, and gave a serious stare at A. Within that short confrontation, he would have died if he wasn't already in his elementization state. A was also looking at Ryo in shock. As far as he knew, no one besides the Hokage clan members could survive a thrust to the heart. On top of that, Ryo's sudden disappearance reminded him of Minato's flying thunder god. "Who are you? Why are you attacking me?" A asked Ryo. "Yamanaka Ryo, a Konoha shinobi. As for my attack, I just want to compare the Cloud's lightning chakra mode to the one I developed myself." Ryo talked calmly, as if he wasn't in a battle. He knew that he had to clearly state his identity, to make A believe that he was just simply fighting him for the sake of battle. "Konoha shinobi? Aren't you an ally of the Hidden Rock? So, Minato and Onaki sent you to kill me," said A, with a hint of sarcasm in his voice. "When you retreated, our cooperation with the Hidden Rock ended. This is for me." Ryo's ice lightning chakra mode was getting more and more fierce, and he stared at A's eyes with apparent bloodlust. Seeing Ryo's face, A sighed. He wasn't sure about the part concerning the cooperation between the Rock and Konoha ending, but from what it looked like, it really seemed like Ryo just wanted to fight him. "We've talked enough. I'll go." Futon, Raisin Shuriken. Ryo looked impatient as he took the initiative with a powerful Raisin Shuriken. A himself had a hot temper, and had been provoked by Ryo several times. Saying he was angry was an understatement. He entered the lightning chakra mode, letting the Raisin Shuriken hit him straight. The wind element is actually strong against lightning. This however does not guarantee a direct victory. The lightning release is strong enough compared to the wind release, it could counter the gap. Facing the immense defensive power of the lightning armor, the Raisin Shuriken was just scratching it. A was, like Ryo, was speed-type ninja. His main attack style however was taijutsu based. Ryo knew well that he was no match for the upcoming 4th Hokage when it came to that. So he decided to use the same approach that Minato used to outspeed A. He took out dozens of ice scalpels, scattering them everywhere around, planting them into the surrounding trees. Flying Thunder God. Seeing a familiar scene, A actually panicked a little. It seemed that Minato's technique had left quite the impact on him. Ryo's purpose of doing this was to simply avoid the mixture of taijutsu and lightning, and also because he wanted to see how a Kage tier would use the lightning chakra mode. With his preparations all set, Ryo took the initiative. He planned to cut the distance without notice, and then break A's lightning chakra mode with the Raise Non, before finally slashing his veins with his scalpel. Ryo found that the lightning chakra flicker couldn't shorten the distance, let alone allow him to use the rest of his plan. It was because whenever Ryo would use the lightning chakra flicker, A would use the same technique to dodge, so Ryo really had no chance. Minato's Flying Thunder God left a deep impression on A. Facing what seemed like the same technique, he couldn't allow himself to lose once again. Using his lightning chakra mode, he rushed towards the ice scalpel that Ryo was teleporting to. With ice teleportation, Ryo was able to dodge A's attack, and it carried on. 2 blue lightning bolts kept moving within the trees. In the lightning village, after A's departure, the village stopped sending troops behind the 3rd Raikage. A himself went to investigate, so sending anyone else would be meaningless. After 3 days and 3 nights, the 3rd Raikage's chakra was finally fully exhausted, he could no longer even use the lightning chakra mode. When the rock saw that, they all collapsed on him, and the 3rd Raikage finally could not take it anymore. Chapter 127, The Cloud's Decision. After the 3rd Raikage collapsed, the little toad from Mount Mayaboka returned, and Ryo, who was fighting A, sensed that the summoning was finished, so he realized that his purpose had been reached. So now he had to let A confirm the death of the 3rd Raikage. Thinking of that, Ryo deliberately showed a flaw in his defense, slowing down for a little bit. Seeing that, A seized the opportunity to punch him, he attacked with all the power he could generate with the lightning chakra mode, and then went away, fading into the forest in the blink of an eye. After a left, Ryo stood up and patted the dirt off of his body. After about an hour and a half of fighting, Ryo accomplished his goal, he was able to slow along enough for the 3rd Raikage to die. Only with the 3rd Raikage's death could there be balance between the rock and clouds. With that, Konoha could take the opportunity and end the war in the Lightning Country. This is year 46, and there are only 2 major battles left before this 3rd World War ends. One was the Battle of Kikyo Pass, and the other was the Battle of Konoha Bridge. Before the Battle of Konoha Bridge, Ryo must take care of all loose ends in order to be able of taking care Uchiha Madara. A used the lightning chakra mode to flicker his way to the 3rd Raikage, until he reached the battlefield. The first thing he saw was the piled up corpses of the rock ninjas, and about 100 living ones who were cleaning the scene. He straight went for their lives, killing them all, and only leaving their Jonin leader alive. Where's the 3rd Raikage? What did you do to him? A looked around for a long time, not finding his father anywhere. The Jonin, knowing that he was doomed to die anyway if he answered, just ignored A's words. A's lightning chakra mode coat flashed, and sparks came out of it, he became a frightening beast, but the Jonin didn't react. A searched again and still found no trace of the 3rd Raikage. He could only take along the Jonin to his village for interrogation. On the other side, after Minato reunited with Ryo, the two returned to Konoha camp. With Minato's wisdom, he already guessed Ryo's purpose. The only thing he didn't understand was Ryo's striking interest in ending this battle as soon as possible. However, out of trust in him, Minato asked no questions. After so many years of knowing him, Minato knew Ryo really well. He had no doubts about his feelings toward him, Kushina or Kakashi's trio. The two reached the camp, and after nearly 3 days of continuously being on guard, they were extremely tired. After bidding farewell to Minato, Ryo returned to his tent and fell asleep. During his sleep, the rock Jonin was being interrogated, and he finally declared the death of the 3rd Raikage. After the rock went after the cloud ninjas trying to chase them, the third Raikage stayed behind on his own to block their way. For an unknown reason, Konoha didn't participate in the rock siege on him. The third Raikage stood on his own, fighting 10,000 of the rock ninjas for 3 days and nights until he finally died. His body was taken by the rock ninjas. Reading the report on the table, A was overwhelmed. The 3RDS image was too mighty to him, he was even too powerful to be killed by such a vicious attack. Being his son, A practically worshipped the third Raikage blindly. This death wasn't just the loss of a father, but his beliefs concerning life and strength also collapsed. By A's side was Killer B, they had been by each other's sides for many years, and B felt a pain as if it was his own. B, you must not die. After a long silence, A talked to his brother. B nodded hard. Okay. Now we should settle the score with the rock. The third Raikage had just died, and the cloud had no leader. A could not be decadent, he had no time for decadence. He summoned all the Jonins in the village, and announced the death of the third Raikage publicly. Needless to say, they were all in disbelief. After all, it was the third Raikage, the peak of the shinobi world at the time. A told everyone about what happened to his father from the beginning till the end, and they all remained silent as he spoke. We should take back the third Raikage's body. And the rock must pay. One of the Jonins spoke. His words were like a pebble thrown into a lake, and everyone approved them. They all agreed that the third Raikage's body must not fall into the hands of the hidden rock, and that they should get their vengeance. Asan, let's take revenge for Lord Raikage. Yes, revenge, he could not die in vain. Revenge. Everyone was too excited, and in the end, they subconsciously said it in one voice. Revenge. Anarchy, let's take back father's body, and teach them a lesson. Said Killer B. A was thinking at the moment of his father's death. What would he want? Revenge? Would that be above anything? The death of his father put an immense responsibility upon his shoulders, and he matured a lot just by that. Yes, he wanted to rush to the rock camp to take revenge, but he had to be cautious. His decision wasn't a light one, it was to determine the fates of 20,000 ninjas from his village. Thinking it over, A finally spoke, everyone calmed down. I also want to avenge my father. But if we fight the rock, do you think Konoha would be on their side again? My father was really strong. Without him, we can't win against both camps. We fear not death. Revenge for the Raikage comes above all. Revenge. Revenge. I know that my village's shinobi are all brave and fearless, and that they don't fear death. I don't fear it myself, for I'll have to face it anyway. But not now. For now, I have to negotiate with Konoha. As your Kage, I have the responsibility to protect you. A's words made everyone quiet, and then one of them screamed, Long live, the fourth Raikage. That young Jonin was looking up as A was speaking, and he saw the 3RDS figure residing in his son. The older Jonin had their eyes red and tearful, as young A was man fit enough to sit in his father's seat, and stand on his own in such circumstances. Long live, the fourth Raikage! Long live, fourth Raikage-sama! A got the approval of all the Jonins, officially succeeding his father, becoming the fourth Raikage. The next day, Minato received the news, and it was directly from a cloud messenger. This ninja came to invite Minato to negotiate with the fourth Raikage. Minato felt weird at the time about A becoming the fourth Raikage. He went to the appointment on time and took Ryo along with him. The purpose of their trip was the same as before, making Konoha and the Cloud sign a peace treaty. The meeting was set to take place in the forest. Before reaching the spot, Ryo used Sage Mode's enhanced perception to ensure the absence of any ambush. As Ryo and Minato reached the spot, the fourth Raikage and Killer B were already waiting there. Chapter 128, The Magic of the Flying Thunder God. Both Minato and A were accompanied by only one escort. Right off the bat, A did not beat around the bush, and asked Minato about Konoha's terms. On the previous night, Minato used the Flying Thunder God to return to Konoha's camp and discuss the matter of truce with the Hidden Cloud. As usual, Danzo strongly opposed the truce. He thought that since the third Raikage had died, Konoha should join forces with the Hidden Rock to destroy the Hidden Cloud completely. Minato, who was infuriated by Danzo's indifference to the deaths of Konoha's ninjas, opposed this suggestion strongly. At the same time, many of the heads of clans agreed with Minato, believing that continuing to fight should just bring unnecessary deaths and injuries. With that, the top of Konoha agreed to cease fighting with the cloud. Of course, they also all agreed that the cloud should pay a hefty price for such a truce. The negotiations between Minato and A also started on this premise. Both sides had peace in mind, and what was the real matter of discussion was the compensation provided by the cloud. Since they were at a huge disadvantage, and had to fight the hidden rock, the hidden cloud were as good as defeated, and they were in a position where they had to pay. Minato was clear about this, and deliberately went overboard with his initial terms. With that, what seemed to be a never-ending wrangling started, and in the end, the two sides reached middle ground. The cloud would admit defeat to Konoha, compensate for their losses with 1 billion Ryo, along with 2 S-class lightning release jutsu. However, the cloud had a condition: Konoha's ninja needed to evacuate from the county within 3 days without getting the rock alert. Otherwise, the 2 S-class lightning jutsu were not to be delivered. Ryo, who had remained silent throughout the entirety of the meeting, frowned at this condition. It was obvious that it was an impossible condition, set by A in order to prevent the leaking of the 2 S-class jutsus. He was ready to interfere, but was stopped by Minato. Minato unexpectedly had no objections and actually agreed. A and Killer B stared at him in awe. He did not pay attention to their expressions, and directly went on to write the peace treaty. After both he and A signed it, the two sides left the place. As soon as A reached his village, he immediately asked the surveillance teams that were keeping an eye on Konoha's camp to mainly focus on the Hidden Rock's camp. At the same time, some speed-type ninjas were dispatched to harass the rock camp. On the other side, when Minato and Ryo returned, a meeting was immediately announced, and all the Jonins and clan representatives were gathered in Minato's tent. Minato directly informed everyone of the cloud's surrender. Hearing the news, everyone were full of joy. Then Ryo talked about the price the cloud had to pay, and their awkward condition. As he finished his words, Minato went on to say, "So I would like you to keep our victory a secret from our ninjas for now. You only need to organize them so that we could evacuate according to my arrangement." "But Minato-san, what are you going to do? There are over 7,000 ninjas in Konoha's camp. With so many people moving, the rock will definitely find out," said Uchiha Kataki. "I'll handle that. The evacuation will start in 2 days. You will know when it happens." Minato smiled and replied. With Minato saying that, Kataki stopped asking questions, for Konoha's yellow flash had such prestige that the Uchiha's clan head did not dare to oppose him. No one had opinions to express, and they went back to make preparations. However, Ryo stayed with Minato. Ryo remained, not understanding what Minato was intending to do. According to what he knew, the Flying Thunder God should not be able to transfer man-people at a time. If that's what Minato is intending on using, then he should go back and forth from and to the camp several hundred times to make the transfers happen. "Ryo, are you thinking about my plan?" asked Minato. "Well, Kataki just mentioned it, there are over 7,000 people in our camp. How could this be done? I didn't expect you to agree to the condition, as it was obviously an intentional handicap from the cloud. I certainly couldn't do it on my own. But isn't that why I have you here?" Hearing Ryo's questions, Minato smiled. "What can I do? I can't use the Flying Thunder God." Ryo had some doubt in his tone. "I don't need you to help me with the actual transfer. I just need you to make an igloo that can hold many people at a time." "An igloo? So that's your plan?" Later, the two discussed the size and quality of the igloo. Minato could transfer Biju and Biju Dama with relative ease, so transferring an igloo was no big deal. Then they went to the woods outside of Konoha's camp. Ryo used ice blocks to create igloos and Minato tried them. In the end, the two chose to have an igloo that could accommodate 700 people. With that, transferring the whole camp should take around 12 transfers. 2 days later, Minato summoned all his ninjas, including the wounded. Ryo also saw Kakashi, Obito, and Rin, again after quite a long time. Rin had been working recently with Ryo's medical team, while the other two were incorporated into their clan's camps, so they all haven't met for a long time. Minato's summoning of everyone gave the trio the chance to reunite. Minato took a glance at the three. Kakashi was already reaching the level of an elite Jonin, while Obito was actually getting to the level of a regular Jonin. Rin, on the other hand, was much more proficient with medical ninjutsu that she was in the manga. "Ryo, why did Minato-sensei summon everyone?" asked Rin with concern. "Yeah. You must know all of the inside info. Ryo Yaro. Rin, Obito, stop messing around, Minato-sensei must have his reasons, said Kakashi to the two. With a look of discontent, he gazed at Obito. Ryo looked at the three, smiled, and said nothing. Minato separated everyone into groups, and then signaled to Ryo. Ryo condensed a large block of ice, 10 meters long, 8 meters wide, and 5 meters high. It was hollow on the inside and divided into 2 floors with an ice wall. Minato made the first group enter the block. Although everyone was confused, they still obeyed his command. After a while, the cube was filled, and Minato waited until everyone in the first group was inside. Minato then put his hands on the ice. Before anyone had a chance to react, he and the block, with everyone in it, disappeared. After a while, he returned to Konoha's camp. After 13 trips, everyone in Konoha's camp was transferred to the borders of the Fire Country. Chapter 129, Returning to Konoha. After the evacuation was completed, Minato handed over the command over the troops to Ryo, and went to the hidden cloud to get the 2S rank lightning jutsus. Over 7,000 of Konoha's ninjas were told by Ryo that their war against the cloud is over and that they had finally won. They were all immersed in the joy of victory. They had been in this battlefield for many years, and with this war's end, they finally get to go home. Looking at the boiling crowds, Ryo did not want to disrupt their joy, and just stood there and enjoyed watching them enjoy their sudden victory. Soon after, Minato returned handing 2 scrolls to Ryo. Here are the 2 jutsus promised by the hidden cloud. There's only one S-rank lightning jutsu among them. The other one is an A-rank jutsu, said Minato. This made Ryo wonder why Minato would accept such an offer. He opened the scroll, and he was in for a surprise. The S-rank jutsu was the 3RDS Hell Stab, and the other one was the added/lightweight rock jutsu, that's usually used by Oniki. Translator note, both techniques had been stated as B rank in the databooks. However, the level of the ultra version of the added/lightweight rock jutsus had not been specified. The author probably made Hell Stab S rank because it had also been stated to be the 3rd Raikage's strongest jutsu, that might have led him to think it was S rank. Needless to say, Hell Stab was the strongest jutsu of the 3rd Raikage, but seeing what practice was required for it made Ryo lose interest in it. What Ryo was really intrigued by was the added/lightweight rock jutsu, as it was more useful than many S-class jutsus. It's no wonder that Minato agreed to accept it. Added/lightweight rock jutsu is actually not limited to manipulating earth and stone. This was a jutsu developed by the 2nd Tsuchikage. It was very practical, as it was capable of changing the quality of a target without using hand seals. The problem with this jutsu was that it was extremely difficult to master, requiring great chakra control and intricate understanding of the structures of the targets. While many can enhance their chakra control, most people who practice this jutsu get stuck when it comes to this understanding. According to Minato, the cloud had got this jutsu 20 years ago, but no one was successful with it for all that time. Ryo was quite excited to see this scroll. It was as if this jutsu was tailored for him. As a medical ninja, he obviously had great chakra control. As for understanding matter, his physics knowledge from his past life should serve him rather well with this jutsu. After understanding the principle of this jutsu, Ryo tried to inject chakra within his ice scalpel, and its molecular structure was actually modified. Following the instructions, Ryo used the chakra on the ice molecules, and the ice scalpel became extremely light. When Minato was presented with the 2 jutsus, he didn't find that they could be of much use to him. Mastering Hell Stab required immense physical power and chakra stores that were 2, and it also relied on the lightning chakra mode. The added/lightweight rock jutsu on the other hand required knowledge that was out of his reach. The reason why Minato agreed to replace the 2nd S-rank jutsu by added/lightweight rock jutsu was that he thought of the possibility that Ryo could make great use of it. Seeing the expression on Ryo's face as he held the scalpel, Minato knew that his intuition was right. He didn't disrupt Ryo's practice, and told everyone to rest in place until he finished, and they all took off and took the road again. In the Cloud Village, the 4th Raikage once again punched through a table. He never thought that Minato could silently move away 7,000 ninjas. He was full of regret, but he wasn't stupid. To get away with a minimum amount of losses, he deliberately chose 2 techniques that were extremely difficult or near impossible to learn. Despite that, he was very angry as he delivered the two jutsus, and if he realizes that Ryo was already on the path to mastering added/lightweight rock jutsu, he'd be even more furious. One leader was completely unaware of what was going on. He knew that Onaki did not find out about this. Right now, Onaki thinks that balance had been restored, and that Konoha, the rock, and the cloud were all mutually restrained. He believed that was the reason why the cloud weren't acting so rashly. However, he was completely wrong. The reason why the cloud weren't quick to attack was the fact that they were preparing a big surprise for the rock. 2 days after Konoha evacuated, A led 10,000 cloud ninjas, along with Killer Bee and Yujito Nii to attack the hidden rock. Onaki sent people to Konoha's camp for help, but what he didn't expect was that the 7,000 Konoha ninjas awaiting them there were actually cloud ninjas in disguise. After the battle started, the rock was being pushed back, and with the leadership of the Nibi, the rock started suffering some heavy losses. At that time, from the back, Konoha's ninjas arrived, and Onaki breathed a sigh of relief. What he did not expect, was that their back line was suddenly attacked by these Konoha ninjas. Onaki was hit by one of them, which went against all his expectations. Haha! Old man, you have killed my father, and today you shall pay the price. A laughed out loud. Onaki turned back to find that the Konoha ninja that attacked him was actually A in disguise. The result of this battle was self-evident. The rock were defeated. Over 4,000 of the 10,000 rock ninjas were killed, Onaki and Han were badly injured and captured, and the captain of the explosion squad was killed by Killer Bee. Old man, you've lost. Now hand over my father's body, and I'll let live. Otherwise, you'll have your burial along with his. Onaki trembled from rage, but he was in no situation to fight back, he could only give back the third Raikage's corpse to A. The cloud, although somewhat violent, always kept their word. After it was confirmed that the body was that of the third Raikage, Onaki and Han were released. Leaving, he thought of the cloud using the transformation jutsu, and how he was fooled by that. His vision became blurry, then he fainted. The cloud all were extremely excited, cheering happily. A's status as the fourth Raikage was solidified, he proved to everyone that he was well worthy of his position. As the cloud were winning the battle, Minato and Ryo returned to Konoha along with 7,000 ninjas. At the entrance of Konoha's camp, the whole village, led by the smiling third Hokage, greeted their heroes. This was the second time that Ryo experienced such a scene. The difference is that the last time he was just in the audience, while now he's the one welcomed by the cheering crowds. Minato and Ryo were up front, followed by the representatives of the different clans and the jonins of the camp. The third was glad to see Minato and Ryo. The two of them were apprentices of his disciples. Of course, he was extremely glad of their achievements. Ryo-kun, I haven't seen you in a long time. A slightly hoarse yet very charismatic voice was heard, it was Orochimaru. Orochi-san, long time no see. The two believers in science were both very happy to see each other, and both had a certain level of friendship. Talking could be left for later. For now, let's let the heroes return home. The third made the people split, creating a path through which Konoha's ninjas entered the village under everyone's cheers. Chapter 130, Danzo's Trio Seeking Trouble. After dealing with the third and the people welcoming him in Konoha, Ryo immediately returned home to see his mother Chintz. When he arrived home, Chintz was sitting in the courtyard together with Shi, chatting and laughing. It seemed that his mother was doing a lot better with someone on her side, and it also seemed like she was getting along very well with Shi. Mom! I'm back! After taking a deep breath, Ryo shouted, greeting his mother. What he did not expect was that Chintz glanced at him, and then looked back at Shi as if he wasn't even there. Ryo scratched his head, thinking of what might have angered his mom, and then, when finding nothing, he repeated, Mom! I'm back! Chintz nodded, turned back at him and said, Ryo, we need to talk. Mom! Ryo was frightened by his mom's seriousness. He had faced all kinds of cage-tier opponents on the battlefield, but never felt this kind of fear. Ryo, how could Uchiha Fugaku know your identity? How far did your late uncle and Sakumo go to protect it? Do you know how much trouble exposing it would bring? Said Chintz angrily. The matter was indeed Ryo's fault. Although Fugaku obviously held no ill will, but as Chintz mentioned, Ryo did have his identity exposed, and that could indeed bring danger to the ones protecting him. Ryo wasn't trying to make excuses as he listened to Chintz's rebuke. Chintz-san, don't get so angry. Fugaku just came to pay a visit, and he never mentioned anything about Ryo. Help came from the most unexpected source. He gave she a grateful look, and his mother realized how tense she was and seemed to loosen up a little bit. Seeing that his mother was no longer angry, Ryo felt relieved, and finally got to have his mother-son time with Chintz, chatting their heart off, with she on the sideline looking at the two with a hint of envy. The next day, Ryo overslept, only waking up at noon when his mother came to tell him that an umbu was waiting by the door for him. The umbu was bringing the orders of the third. Ryo had to be at his office to attend a meeting with Konoha's elders before 3 p.m. Such meetings really annoyed Ryo. To him, these elders were just weak old men who were not making any contributions to the village. They were the type he liked to mingle with the least. However, as a Konoha shinobi, he had to follow the 3 RDS orders. No matter how he felt about it, he had to attend the meeting. After eating lunch at home, he walked into the conference room exactly at 3 p.m. Oh, isn't that the Yamanaka's little genius, getting so big, so many people have been waiting for you. Ryo didn't have time to sit down before he heard those words. He looked at Danzo and sighed, not understanding why some people just seemed to have some sort of a death wish. Am I late, Danzo-san? Danzo could respond. The third did indeed call for the meeting at 3 p.m. But he thought, shouldn't it be common sense to arrive early to such a high-level meeting? However, Ryo was not late indeed, and he had nothing to say. Ryo, at the last second here you are. Take a seat. Minato sounded somewhat cold. Of course, Ryo understood Minato's expression. He did not continue to argue with Danzo, and sat down right beside Orochimaru. It's worth mentioning that the third was taking the center seat, with Minato being the closest to him from the left, followed by Kushina. On his right, there was Orochimaru, followed by Ryo. The two advisors were sitting beside Kushina and Ryo, while Danzo was on the other side of the table facing the third. Between him and the rest were the heads of every clan and the elders of the village. Ryo was at Orochimaru's side when he heard him say, Ryo-kun, although I don't want to have any conflicts with Danzo, if you ever need help, you can reach for me. Orochi-san, I'm never the one seeking that trouble. But no matter how much I stay away from him, he keeps provoking me. What can I do? Hearing Ryo, Orochimaru smiled and said nothing. The third was looking at everyone on the table, and was very pleased with Ryo. Including himself, he found that the table had 5 cage tier ninjas, 4 of them were on the battlefield. Minato, who seemed to have scolded Ryo, was actually protecting him. Although he did nothing, his eyes showed that he couldn't wait to attack Danzo. That's besides Orochimaru, who was openly a supporter of Ryo. The mood in the conference room was quite tense, and the third stood up to summarize their situation, cough. The war in the Lightning Country is over. Yesterday, our heroes returned, and today's meeting is about their what. We are very happy that we've won on that battlefront. However, this doesn't mean that the mistakes that had been made there could be ignored. As soon as the third finished his words, Koharu interfered. What Koharu just said is correct. Kushina, could you explain to us how and why you escaped from the village in secret? Homura Mitokato also asked. Without Kushina, we wouldn't have been able to win the battle in the Lightning Country. Homura, Koharu, there's no reason to make a fuss about that. The third tried to help Kushina explain. But this can't offset the mistake she made. I suggest getting Kushina under Root's surveillance from now on. If your umbu aren't reliable enough, we could only count on Danzo Root. Are you finished, old woman? The red-hot habanero's temper was unforgiving. She said that angrily as she looked at Koharu. The latter never thought that Kushina would talk to her in such a manner. She stood up, pointed at her and asked the third, Hiruzen, did she just say what I heard her say? Want to get the old man to handle me? Then shall I bring the QB to deal with you? Kushina, calm down. The third heard Kushina say that and hurried to try and stop things from getting more aggravated. Koharu knew that Kushina had become a perfect Jinchuriki. Knowing that she was such a powerful force, she could only strive to get that power under full control. However, she ignored one thing: she didn't have enough strength to gain control over Kushina. Among the older generation of Cage Tier Ninja, she had Jiraiya, who was like a sensei to her, on her side. And when it came to the younger ones, Minato was her boyfriend, while Ryo was her disciple. Kushina got angry, turned around and left. Minato apologized to everyone and went behind her. You elders are having it easy. You can't just make such a decision concerning Kushina Ne-san. After that, Ryo also stood up and left. Orochimaru also wanted to leave, he had things to discuss with Ryo. But he couldn't just do that, out of respect to his sensei. With the returning heroes all gone, the third side, as all he could do was to announce that the meeting was temporarily over. Chapter 131, New Idea. The three's early departure from the meeting room made the atmosphere awkward to the extreme. When the third announced the end of the meeting, everyone looked at Danzo's trio strangely. Danzo and the others did not understand the three RD's behavior. Kushina was a perfect Jinchuriki, there should be no fear that she would lose control if provoked. At least, that's what they thought. Whenever the rest left, they started arguing with the third. Hiruzen, what do you mean by this? Even if you don't support us, we'll still get Kushina under our own surveillance. Koharu complained to the third. The third was about to explain his stance, when Homura spoke, leaving the Kyuubi's Jinchuriki free was a huge mistake from the beginning. If this doesn't change, it will eventually backfire at the village. The third sighed. He never knew when his three friends became like this, selfish, greedy, and seeking nothing but control over power. Koharu, Homura, do you even know what being a perfect Kyuubi Jinchuriki mean? Hashirama-san is no longer here. If she wants to destroy the village, it would be done in the blink of an eye. His words surprised the two of them. They knew that the Kyuubi was very powerful, but they didn't expect it to be so powerful. Sarutobi, you're being overdramatic. Even if we manage to provoke her into losing control, how many ninjas would we need to beat the Kyuubi? Danzo, who had been silent for so long, finally spoke. The third smiled and gave the three a scroll. When they read it, their faces turned pale, especially Koharu, she was shivering uncontrollably. The scroll mentioned that when in perfect Jinchuriki state, Kushina took down both the Hakubi and the Nibi, in just 2 minutes. When the three were young, they've been through many wars. Of course, they saw both those Biju. The Hakubi especially was horrible. Knowing she beat it in just 2 minutes made the Kyuubi seem like an invincible entity to them. Koharu was in ruin. What kind of being did she just provoke? If Kushina wanted, she'd be dead, with actually no one being able to speak for her after death. Now you understand. Even if it was just the Kyuubi, we wouldn't be able to take it down with the power of the whole village, let alone that now with Kushina being a perfect Jinchuriki, its power should actually be enhanced and more terrifying. Turning to Koharu, he saw her nodding, face pale, as she left. Homura also left with a lingering look. Danzo, what else do you have? Asked the third. Hiruzen, I know that the Kyuubi is powerful, but there are also ways to suppress its power. There's wood release and the Mangekyo. The third interrupted Danzo asking with a serious face, are you thinking about the first Hokage? Yes. Anything for Konoha's sake. You think that the Kyuubi is so strong, so if you don't restrain it, it will always remain a threat. The Uchiha are unreliable, and the Senjo clan has no more users of wood release. Our only way to control it is through the first Hokage-sama. If we can bring him ba. Enough. Never mention this again. The third was furious by Danzo's suggestion, and a startling momentum erupted from his body. Danzo, confronted by such powerful momentum from a much more powerful man, was shaking all over. The third Hokage couldn't bear watching his friends have such wicked ideas. He then sighed, and controlled himself, as Danzo took the opportunity to bow his head and leave quickly. The third looked as if he had years added to his age within that simple meeting. He just sat back on his chair and started smoking his pipe. Back to Ryo, Minato, and Kushina, the trio went directly to the barbecue restaurant after they left the conference room. As the other two made the order, Ryo went out quickly, and brought back a purple-haired little girl, Yujao. Minato looked curiously at the two holding hands and suddenly realized what was happening. Ryo saw Minato's shocked look, and he automatically ignored it and looked away. As for little Yujao, her attention was all over the barbecue, not even noticing the presence of Minato. Out of courtesy, Ryo introduced the two to each other. Minato Ni-san, this is my good friend Yujao. Yujao, this is Minato Namikaze, Konoha's Yellow Flash. Yellow Flash. Minato-sama, hello. Yujao was startled by Minato's identity, and immediately stood up straight and saluted him. Yujao, no need to be so nervous. Minato and I are very close, you could just address him as your older brother. Minato-sama, is it really alright? Of course. Just like Ryo, just call me Ni-san, Minato said with a smile. Minato was naturally charismatic, and Yujao quickly loosened up. The barbecue was finally ready, and the four started eating. Damn old women! Why are you trying to calm me down, Minato? I should just let Kurama go all out on her. Ugh! The more I think of it, the more furious I become. While eating the barbecue he was buying her, Kushina was taking her wrath on Minato. Yujao looked at her a little strangely. She already saw Kushina as someone with a pretty bad temper. However, she never heard her swear. Whoever made her so angry could not be a good person. Minato could only face Kushina's wrath with a smile. This was still wartime, and the villagers would be endangered if the Kyuubi went rampant in the village. In another place, at peacetime, Minato wasn't sure if he would actually stop her. Kushina Ni-san, don't be so angry. Minato Ni-san is right. You don't want to give Konoha trouble at such a time. Kushina snorted, ignoring the two, and calling the waiter, ordering a whole table of the most expensive meat the place had. Minato smiled bitterly and felt his wallet. Ryo knew that Kushina was getting what she wanted. She smiled and got ready for her battle with the barbecue. Yujao didn't eat much before getting full. The appetite of child under 10 years of age wasn't that large. Ryo sent her home and then got back to the barbecue place. As soon as he sat down, he heard Minato saying, "Ryo, I never thought you'd be a lilicon. Hey, I don't want to be told by you that I'm a lilicon. I'm not giving you crap for running after Kushina Ni-san all the time." Cough. Minato never thought that Ryo would be so feisty in his response, and he awkwardly pretended to cough. "Ryo, I actually just thought. Don't you have some kind of distance limit for your ice teleportation?" Minato tried to bluntly change the topic. Ryo, who didn't want to bring up that matter, nodded. "So here's what I'm thinking. Why not try to integrate space-time ninjutsu within your ice teleportation? I find that you already have a good talent for space perception, you should be successful." Space-time ninjutsu? Flying Thunder God? Minato's proposal was so tempting to Ryo, it shook him up. "I'm not talking about you learning Flying Thunder God. I'm saying that if you get better space perception, you should be able to sense your ice from a distance and teleport to it." Minato's words made Ryo's eyes shine bright, for this was indeed a feasible method. "Minato Ni-san, can you help me with practice tomorrow?" Ryo was full of anticipation. "No problem. I'll see you tomorrow in the third training ground." Chapter 132, Improving Ice Teleportation. The following day, Ryo arrived to the third training ground very early. He had spent the whole night thinking about Minato's approach to improve ice teleportation. Ryo's ice teleportation allowed him to instantly flicker up to 50 meters away as long as there was ice at the spot to which he flickered. It goes without saying that this movement, being instantaneous, was even faster than his flicker in the Ice Lightning Chakram mode. If he could deal with his distance limitation, Ryo would have a technique that's rather equivalent to the Flying Thunder God, which might also bring possibilities beyond that. Minato arrived much later, along with Kushina, Kakashi, Obito, and Rin. After handing the trio's training to Kushina, Minato started working with Ryo. Ryo's ice teleport looked like a Kekii Genkai to Minato. He speculated that Ryo used his own ice chakra to locate external ice and achieve the spatial movement. The reason why Minato could determine that Ryo's technique was a true teleportation was the fact that he was far more sensitive to space-time fluctuations than most people. When Ryo used his ice teleportation, Minato could clearly perceive the fluctuations in the fabric of space. That's why he estimated that Ryo had great talent for space perception. The first step in the training was to get Ryo to try to perceive space. Minato covered Ryo's eyes and placed dozens of Thunder God Kunao around Ryo, and he flickered between them non-stop. Ryo entered Sage mode, and following Minato's directions, he tried to sense the fluctuations in the fabric of space around him. Even with the enhanced perception brought by Sage mode, Ryo was still unable to capture any fluctuations, so the latter could only stop. In theory, Ryo's use of ice teleport should mean that he has already some level of development when it came to his space perception. The two started thinking of what must have went wrong, until Minato noticed Ryo's use of an ice scalpel. With that he realized that Ryo's space perception should be limited to existence of ice. He then held an ice scalpel in his hand, and repeated the same drill with Ryo. With the guidance of the scalpel, and Minato's continuous use of Flying Thunder God, Ryo started finally perceiving fluctuations in the fabric of space. Next, Minato threw away the ice scalpel and continued. This time, Ryo was able to clearly perceive the fluctuations in space by using Sage Mode. After finishing this first step, Ryo placed the ice scalpel 100 meters away from Ryo. Ryo, what you have to do now is to find a way to perceive this ice scalpel that's 100 meters away. With this exercise, you should rely on yourself, I cannot help you. The only hint I could give you is to make use of what you've learned with the previous exercise. Ryo nodded, closing his eyes and focusing his mental power into the distance. He could actually sense the scalpel in the distance, but had no way to make his special link with it. In reality, Ryo had a special link with his ice. This link is the one that is the basis of his ice teleportation, but its range was only 50 meters. Minato said that he should find a way to fold space, and that should make this link ignore this distance, then he could overcome the distance limit of his teleportation. Over the following few days, Ryo kept thinking about the process of folding space. Unfortunately, he wasn't getting anywhere. One of Ryo's strongest traits was his perception abilities. In both lives he had, it kept helping him time after time. Even though he wasn't making progress, Ryo wasn't giving up. A few days later, he used summoning to bring Kajin to the third training ground. Then he did the same, summoning Rashomon this time. On both times, he carefully perceived the flow of chakra in space. Summoning was also a space-time jutsu. This time of jutsu with its disregard of distance was the biggest application of space folding. Ryo did summoning several times in succession, and finally found a clue to understanding space folding. After the release of summoning, Ryo closed his eyes and tried to locate the scalpel in the distance with his mental power. With his spiritual power and chakra as medium, Ryo finally was able to complete space folding, and create that special link with the scalpel that was at the time over 200 meters away from him. With this link, Ryo finally completed a long-distance teleportation for the first time. After being through with the most difficult steps, practice afterwards became much simpler. With Minato's guidance, Ryo improved his ice scalpel, infusing it with a little spiritual power. This way, as long as the ice was within his sensing range, Ryo could fold space and complete the teleportation. Ryo's teleportation distance limitation was finally dealt with under the joint efforts of him and Minato. For Ryo, while this technique was comparable to the Flying Thunder God in speed, and maybe even more flexible, it was clearly less practical, as it didn't allow him to teleport non-frozen people and objects. To deal with this problem, Minato suggested making Ryo learn teleportation barrier, which was a space-time seal. In Minato's words, Ryo's ice teleportation had more potential than the Flying Thunder God in battle. This was what's most important. For other respects, it was enough for Ryo to learn the teleportation barrier technique. After Minato's explanation, Ryo realized the nature of Minato's teleportation barrier. It was actually a special seal that combines space folding with the Uzumaki's Fuinjutsu. Its biggest effect was allowing for long-distance teleportation. The reason why Minato developed this technique was that the Flying Thunder God had special limitations in special circumstances. Minato's development of this special mark was to make up for the deficiencies of the technique. Ryo was somewhat curious about these special situations, and Minato answered mentioning the incident with the second Hokage when he could teleport away from his death. This surprised Ryo greatly. He did not expect that Tobirama's death was related to such a problem. However, this explains why the second Hokage didn't use the Flying Thunder God when he and his team were pushed into a desperate situation, staying behind instead to die in order to save his disciples' lives. Minato didn't mention any clear details about the incident, as these are just things that were vaguely described to him in the past. Afterwards, Minato handed Ryo his mark to analyze, and the latter learned how to make his own teleportation barrier marks relying on his understanding of folding space and the Uzumaki's Fuinjutsu. With that, his practice was over. Ryo left marks at his family's place, the Forest of Death, the third training ground, and just about any place they went to a lot. From then on, there was another person able to teleport through long distances besides Minato. Chapter 133, Apprentice. Unexpectedly, Ryo was able to remain in Konoha for over a month. In addition to improving his ice teleportation, he also met Yujao quite often. "Hey, Yujao, what do you want to have today?" In the early morning, Ryo took Yujao to Ichiraku Ramen. Over the past month, he actually took her here very often. The owner Toki always greeted them and welcomed them happily. After eating ramen, the two would go to the third training ground, where Ryo would teach Yujao Kenjutsu. Like in the manga, Yujao loved Kenjutsu, and Ryo, being Sakumo's student for a very long time, had some Heitake clan-style knowledge that he was passing on to her. As Ryo was immersed in this world of his, the third was already working on his next plan. In his office, a young 9-year-old boy was standing before him. The third looked at the boy's black hair, and felt nostalgic about his old days. The kid didn't show the slightest signs of being under tension while standing before the Hokage, and he quietly waited for his orders. He was Uchiha Shisui, one of the Uchiha's geniuses, and the one to be later on known as Shisui of the body flicker. He was a descendant of Kagami Uchiha, the third Hokage's comrade, and he was also to become Itachi's greatest friend and mentor. The third reminisced for quite some time about his days with his old pal Kagami, before finally coming back to his mind. Sorry, I've been distracted. Shisui, you have graduated 2 years ago. How has your training with your clan been going? Asked the third with a smile. Thanks for your concern, Hokage-sama, my clan has been very kind to me. Shisui answered politely. After early graduation, usually ninjas would get trained by their own clans for a while before joining a team. Shisui was no exception. This had several purposes. It was an efficient way to help a genin master his clan's signature techniques, while giving him a deeper sense of belonging. After graduating from the academy at the age of 7, Shisui had been studying ninjutsu with his clan for 2 years. According to customs, it was about time for him to join the ranks of other ninjas in his clan and begin performing tasks. As the third was very impressed of the young genius, he invited specifically to ask him if he had preference for a certain future instructor had. Shisui, you know I was a good friend to Kagami. If you have any jonin you want as your instructor, just tell me. The third directly asked young Shisui. Hokage-sama, I have no requirements, as long as the instructor is strong enough. I need to learn and become stronger to contribute to Konoha's prosperity as soon as possible, said Shisui firmly. The third laughed, and felt that the kid had indeed inherited his comrade's will. He felt very relieved. The more he talked with Shisui, the more he was impressed. Speaking of powerful ninjas, right now, we have 2 who are pretty strong. One is Minato, and the other is Ryo. Minato already has decibels, so how does Ryo sound to you? Asked the third. Ryo Yamanaka-sama. Ryo's reputation had reached Shisui, just like everyone else in Konoha. Yes, that one. He's Kage tier, powerful, and had just returned from the Lightning Country's battlefield. Hokage-sama, will Ryo Yamanaka-sama be willing to teach me? Shisui thought about the relationship between the Yamanaka and the Uchiha clan, and then asked awkwardly. Of course. Go to the third training ground and bring along Ryo Yamanaka. The third wanted to prove he wasn't talking out of nothing. The went, and in no time, he reached Ryo. After a while, Ryo, his face gloomy after having his private world invaded, entered the office. The third noticed his face, but didn't ask much. He just said with a smile, Ryo, I have an apprentice for you. I don't want an apprentice. I'll excuse myself, see you Hokage-sama. Ryo said as he turned around to leave. Cough, Hokage-sama, it seems that Ryo-san was having some sort of date that we have interrupted. Whispered the to the third. The third face blushed. He understood why Ryo was so gloomy entering the office. Cough. Ryo, hold on. What else Hokage-sama? Ryo, if you accept this apprentice, I promise to never disturb a date of yours again. Also, you won't struggle with Shisui, he's a genius. He just needs a good teacher to guide him. The third said. Shisui. Yes. Shisui Uchiha, his clan's latest prodigy. Hearing that name, Ryo immediately decided to accept the new apprentice. Just Shisui's Mangekyo Sharinan was enough to intrigue him, let alone his nickname, Shisui of the body flicker. Ryo saw Shisui, who was quite nervous, stepping in, and he nodded in approval. Seeing Ryo's approval, the third was relieved. He nodded as well to Shisui, and said goodbye to Ryo. Shisui walked towards Ryo. Just when he reached him, the latter put his hand over his shoulder and said, "Close your eyes." Hearing Ryo, Shisui closed his eyes immediately. Using the teleportation barrier, Ryo reached the third training ground with Shisui. Hokage-sama, was that the Flying Thunder God? Asked the Umbu in surprise. The third shook his head and said, no, this is another technique created by Minato. I didn't expect that the kid would learn it so quickly. Shisui, who was taken to the third training ground, was looking around in awe. Now you can introduce yourself. Hearing Ryo, Shisui turned to his new instructor and said immediately, Ryo Yamanaka-sama, I'm Uchiha Shisui, it's my honor to meet you. Drop the sama part. Since I accepted being your teacher, you're my apprentice now. Just call me sensei. Yes, sensei. Alright. After establishing their relationship, the first thing Ryo did was making Shisui face Yujao. With Ryo's power, Shisui wouldn't have a chance to show what he's all about. The only one around that was fitting for this fight was Yujao. While Shisui was the Uchiha clan's genius, Yujao had practiced Kenjutsu with Kakashi when she was young, and then learned more of the Heitake style with Ryo recently. Even though she was so young, she was already at the level of a Chunin. However, Shisui was still on a whole other level, and she had no way to handle such an opponent. Chapter 134, Shisui's Talent. Ryo's purpose was just to figure out Shisui's current level, so as soon as it showed that the latter was winning, Ryo stopped the fight. At this age, being high Chunin level, so fitting of an Uchiha genius, said Ryo. Shisui's response was unexpectedly calm, and he showed no signs of arrogance facing Ryo's praise, as if he wasn't a 9-year-old child. Then Ryo asked about Shisui's basics practice, and the latter told him that he had finished climbing the trees and walking on water. Ryo was somewhat fond of this disciple who came out of nowhere. Facing the real deal was nothing like reading his description in the manga. Later on in his life, Shisui was to be called Shisui of the Body Flicker, for his advanced use and knowledge of the body flicker jutsu. Ryo is originally a speed-type ninja as well. He was greatly familiar with the body flicker, so Ryo believed that with his training, Shisui should surpass the level he had reached in the manga. Ryo was in a comfortable position to use the knowledge he had from his previous life without raising suspicions. After all, Shisui was already his apprentice, and there was no reason for him to hold back. Shisui, what kind of ninja do you want to be in the future? I'm talking about fighting style. Ryo looked at Shisui and asked. Shisui took a while to think and then said, Sensei, I think speed is the most valuable asset a ninja could have. I want to be a speed-style ninja. Hearing the answer he wanted to hear, Ryo became even more satisfied with his new disciple. This way, Ryo's enclosed world had a third party join it. However, this third part was rather sensible, never interrupting Ryo and Yujao's chats. Shisui had fire, lightning, and wind affinities. When it came to fire, Ryo had nothing to teach him. Ryo was great with lightning release of course, so they spent their first few days focusing mainly on that. Ryo wasn't about to teach Shisui body flickering yet. He remembered that in the manga, Shisui had 2 signature moves. One of them made him mainly invisible, even to censor ninjas, and relied mainly on his immense speed. The other one required a few extra hand seals, and that was the after-image clone jutsu. Ryo speculated that it involved wind release somehow. Wind transformation was usually linked to having a cutting effect, so Ryo had no idea how wind release would be linked to flickering. Over the course of the few following days, Ryo exposed Shisui to wind release, while thinking about the matter, what will change with the addition of wind release to the flicker? Shisui, how do you perceive the wind? Ryo thought for a long time without finding clue, so he decided to ask Shisui, for perhaps his simple answers might open closed doors. Sensei, I believe it's the flow of air. Its effects differentiate depending on its speed. Ryo's eyes shined brightly as he heard Shisui's simple answer. He suddenly realized that he had been shackled by this world's warrior mentality, making him limit air to being a mean to inflict cuts. Realizing this, Ryo's mind became clear, and wind release suddenly held many more uses. Then, he started training, and finally managed to merge the concepts of body flicker with wind release. With that, a technique similar to Shisui's after-image clone jutsu was born. Wind didn't need ramp up to form, it was instantaneous. With the help of wind release, one would limit the time it took to initiate the flicker, creating an effect that's not too far behind the lightning chakra flicker in speed. Moreover, when moving, the wind chakra would leave a residual after-image in the user's initial spot, making it difficult for his enemy to figure out his current spot. Ryo tested the wind release body flicker in the third training ground in front of Yujao and Shisui. In no time, the two looked around seeing Ryo being all over the place around them, and they were shocked. Yujao ran over to Ryo, almost worshipping Ryo, "Ryo ne-san. What's this technique? It's not clones, no." Ryo smiled and patted on her head saying, "This is a new type of body flicker I've created for you and Shisui." Hearing that, the eyes of the two shined brightly. Ryo laughed watching the two stare at him in awe, and began teaching them right away. Shisui had an amazing talent for body flickering. Just like Enko had a talent for assimilating natural energy, body flicker seemed to be a technique designed just to be used by Shisui. This technique was different from a normal flicker. After Ryo's improvements, while it was much faster, it was also much more difficult to master. In just an afternoon, he managed to perform the body flicker. However, Ryo's attention was more towards Yujao. Shisui looked at her with envy, and for the first time, he noticed the advantages a girl could get. Ryo was actually very serious about teaching Yujao. The day didn't end without her getting a little bit into the technique. From then on, it was time for her to master it. A week later, both apprentices already mastered the body flicker jutsu fully. In fact, Shisui had complete mastery over the technique 3 days before that, but he couldn't show that as Ryo told him not to. With that done, Ryo began his first step towards getting them to merge wind release to the flicker. What he had found out, was that the two of them were clueless when it came to wind release. No one taught them wind release ninjutsu before, and Ryo could only start teaching them from scratch. 2 weeks later, both of them managed to use their wind affinities. Then, under Ryo's guidance, Shisui finally managed to merge the two techniques together, using the after-image clone jutsu in front of Ryo for the first time. However, Yujao wasn't able to get it just yet. Seeing that Shisui was successful, she was under even more pressure and she kept failing again and again. Ryo's face was gloomy. He stopped practicing with Shisui, and used the teleportation barrier to throw him into the forest of death. Shisui looked around in the forest and smiled. Returning to the third training ground, Ryo continued teaching Yujao, one-on-one this time. The following day, the two apprentices arrived at the third training ground quite early, and began practicing as usual. That's when Ryo was interrupted by Orochimaru. "Ryo-kun! I have brought something very good to show you," said Orochimaru excitedly. Ryo thought about the manga's timeline. The Battle of Kikyo Pass should be drawing close, and Orochimaru must have found Hashirama's cells. Ryo was also very interested in that. The first Hokage cells were the monk Tang's meat of the Naruto world. Unfortunately, it was as if this meat was poisoned. Translator note: Monk Tang is a fictional Chinese character from Journey to the West. In the story, Monk Tang's flesh is supposed to grant immortality and eternal youth. Poisoned Monk Tang's meat should probably mean that it's more like a double-edged sword, bring both death and great power. Ryo wanted to see firsthand what was special about these cells, so he accompanied Orochimaru to his lab. Orochimaru's lab was located outside the village. Ryo followed him all the way there, hoping to see the good things that he was mentioning. However, Ryo didn't find Hashirama's cells. Instead, what he found was a pair of Sharinans. Ryo felt the power of the two Sharinans that were handed to him, and his face gradually became heavy. Chapter 135, Kagami's Sharinan. Orochimaru-san, is this a pair of Sharinan? Feeling the immense power emitted the pair of Sharinans in front of him, Ryo wouldn't help but ask. "This is a gift that I just received from Danzo and the two counselors." Orochimaru licked his lips and replied. Ryo was shocked, but did not say anything. His full attention was paid to the Sharinan in front of him. The connection between the tomo upon it was unusual. It was definitely above the regular Sharinan, but it wasn't a Mangekyo Sharinan either. It was the first time Ryo noticed such a pattern, whether it was in this world or when reading the manga during his past life. "Orochi-san, do you have any idea on who the owner of these eyes might be?" asked Ryo. "It should be Kagami Uchiha," said Orochimaru after thinking for a while. "How could it be? Isn't he already dead?" Ryo was a little surprised. There was no mentioning of Kagami's eyes in the manga. If Danzo did have them, why did they never appear? A ninja's body is very valuable. It is rumored that the second Hokage also preserved the body of Uchiha Madara. It's no wonder that Danzo and his pals preserved Kagali's corpse. Orochimaru explained. "Ryo-kun, it was thanks to you that I got to have these eyes." "Thanks to me? Ryo did not understand what Orochimaru meant. If you kept quiet the other day and didn't go against Danzo so clearly, he wouldn't have tried to buy my loyalty with these eyes. Hearing Orochimaru, Ryo became speechless. He never thought that his presence would make Danzo even trade the eyes of his old comrade. Orochi-san, I'm sorry, but I have to ask. Is there any way you could give me those Sharingan? Ryo hesitated at first, and then asked. These eyes were those of Kagami Uchiha. Although they hadn't evolved into Mangekyo Sharingan yet, they were much stronger than regular 3-tomo Sharingan. Ryo thought of his disciple, and that these eyes might be somewhat helpful to him when he awakens the Mangekyo. Hearing Ryo's request, Orochimaru did not hesitate, directly handing them to Ryo. To him, Ryo was his confidant, a good friend who also chose to march through the road of science. What's more important, Orochimaru hadn't been tortured by Itachi yet, so he wasn't so obsessed with the Sharingan as he was in the manga. Ryo was surprised by this swift approval. Orochimaru's trust in him had exceeded all his expectations. Such trust made Ryo embarrassed. After thinking for a while, Ryo decided to help Orochimaru work on his dream of achieving eternal life. Orochi-san, I remember you asked me before about the possibility of achieving eternal life. Before, I've told that one could achieve it in a way. But now, I'm telling you've only recently figured out how we might be able to achieve that. Hearing Ryo, Orochimaru's eyes grew bright, he stared at Ryo speechless. Orochi-san, don't worry, I've been thinking about this ever since you asked me that question. Later, when I was studying Fuhutsu with Kushina Ne-san, I discovered their method of sealing one's souls, and that inspired me with this idea. Soul. Orochimaru's attention was caught by Ryo. Yes, soul. Well, I think it's one's consciousness. The body is just a vessel that accommodates it. If one was to figure out a way to make it move from one vessel to the other, they would find a way to achieve eternal life. After Ryo finished his words, Orochimaru stood still. After a good while, he started laughing. He never thought that Ryo would be the one to give him the clue he was seeking. On top of being a Sunin, Orochimaru was often nicknamed Cold Blood. Like a snake is a cold-blooded animal, he showed no emotions. But today, after getting the clue to eternal life, Orochimaru's laughter was going out of control, he was extremely happy. Orochi-san, don't be so happy so early. Going for eternal life this way has its big problem. Ryo said to Orochimaru. What problem? Orochimaru was surprised, he calmed down a little bit then asked. It's about the soul, it's necessary that soul fits its new vessel well after making the transition. Otherwise, the soul would be damaged and its strength would be affected. Ryo's problem sounded very reasonable to Orochimaru, but he believed that eternal life was worth all of that and even more. Orochi-san, I know what you're thinking. Anyone would choose eternal life over a short one, even with the damage that could occur to their souls. However, I have a way to solve that problem and limit the damage. Curious to hear it. Ryo said with a smile, teasing Orochimaru. Orochimaru looked at him helplessly and said, Ryo-kun, I think we need to discuss the matter of these Sharinans. No we don't Orochi-san. Hearing Orochimaru's threat, Ryo stopped teasing him and told him everything he knew about cloning. He compared the result of cloning to a shadow clone that never disappeared. Orochimaru quickly understood the matter, and also understood Ryo's solution. It was all about one's own cells to clone their own body, the sealing the consciousness of the new body as it grows up to eliminate the problem of losing one's own soul. Because it's your own body, it would surely fit your soul, and there should be no problem in adapting with it. After learning about this, Orochimaru rushed out to another chamber in his lab. He had to conduct his research and had no time to take care of Ryo. Ryo shook his head helplessly and returned to the third training ground with teleportation barrier. En route's headquarters, Danzo, Koharu, and Homura were together discussing the cooperation with Orochimaru. The two men's faces were expressionless, looking at Koharu who seemed a bit anxious. Danzo, even if Orochimaru took Kagami's eyes, there's no guarantee that he would be helpful to us. Why didn't you and Homura discuss this with me? She was somewhat angry, felt hurt by the fact that the eyes of their comrade were used as trading tools. Koharu, don't be angry. This is just the first step. We just need to keep providing Orochimaru with Kekkei Genkai, and he'll be on our side. Even if we never succeed, I have a way to get him out of Konoha, said Danzo. Homura never spoke, but it was obvious that he was on Danzo's side. Koharu sighed and stopped arguing. For the first time, she felt that old comrades had changed. They were no longer the ones who used to be willing to offer their whole to Konoha. She got up, and left Root's headquarters. Chapter 136, Necessary Growth. Orochimaru had no idea about Danzo's conspiracy. However, even if he knew, he wasn't about to give the matter any of his precious time. He was working with Anko on the new cloning technology. It's worth mentioning that the relationship between him and Anko was very different from what it was like in the manga. Unlike with that simple sensei-apprentice relationship, Anko was now his main assistant. Over the past few days, Ryo acquired a new understanding of the wind nature transformation. Now, this nature transformation was a much more valuable asset to him than it was before. He felt that he needed to learn more, so asked Minato to show him a few more B-class wind release jutsu. Shisui had made tremendous progress over the course of those days. While he was at the level of Chunin in other aspects, his flicker speed was comparable to that of a Quasi-Kage. Seeing how Ryo taught him such a powerful technique without any hesitation, Shisui was moved by his sensei's trust, and had much more respect to him. The Uchiha, who were dissatisfied by the fact that their genius was given the young Ryo as sensei, all stopped complaining after seeing Shisui's flicker. Because Shisui was using wind release, those of them who had the one Tomo Sharingan were not able to see him. Those with the two Tomo Sharingan could just capture the shadow of his movement, while those with the three Tomo Sharingan were able to fully capture Shisui movement, but were unable to distinguish between him and his after-images. The Uchiha, always proud of their Sharingan, were completely convinced by the results of Shisui's training. Not just that, some of them actually grew a bit greedy. Many of the Uchiha wanted Shisui to hand over this new flicker technique to the clan. However, they were all stopped by the clan's head, Uchiha Kataki. While the rest of them didn't know it, Kataki, who had been fighting alongside Ryo in the Lightning Country's battleground, was really familiar with Ryo's strength. Kataki knew very well, that even he, as a Quasi-Kage, would not be able to stand up to Ryo for a minute, with the possibility of him being taken down in an instant. After learning about the matter from Shisui, Ryo's view of Kakaika changed a little bit. Anyone could turn greedy. What really matters was whether they would live long enough to enjoy what they craved after taking it. Kataki's approach made Ryo pay more respect to him. That man was really worthy of being clan head. Shisui, remember this. In the future, whenever someone wants to take what's yours by force, kill them on the spot. If they do happen too tough for you to handle, just call me. I'll help you finish them. Yes, sensei. Hearing Ryo, Shisui laughed very happily. Ryo had nothing more to say about the matter, and he continued working on wind ninjutsu, while Shisui continued his daily practice. A few days after the incident, Yujao was about to graduate from the academy. As a graduation gift, Ryo got her to sign a summoning contract with Kajin, making the later her summoned beast. Early next morning, Yujao arrived early at the third training ground, waiting for Ryo to arrive. At the same time, Ryo and Shisui arrived to practice. After waiting for quite a while, Yujao rushed at the approaching Ryo saying, "Ne-san, you must come with me to my graduation exam." "All right." Ryo very happily agreed. Even if she didn't ask, Ryo was going to do that anyway. Seeing Ryo agree, Yujao was very happy, and went to the academy. Soon after she left, Ryo followed with Shisui alongside him. The graduation test had just started. Yujao had no problem dealing with it. Her basics were flawless, and she passed with a perfect score. For her future team, Ryo had decided who she would go with. The third had already promised not to interfere. As soon as the exam was finished, Anko came to take Yujao along with her. Yes, the sensei that Ryo picked for Yujao was Orochimaru. One could say all he wants on Orochimaru, but in fighting experience, he was second to none in the village. Another thing was that Ryo had been overprotective of Yujao whenever he trained her. She needed to learn about the cruelty of this world, and Orochimaru was perfect for that. In the manga, Sasuke was Orochimaru's apprentice for 2 years. His power increased immensely, and was even able to take down Deidara. In his battle against Deidara, Sasuke was able to restrain his opponent, rendering him helpless enough to resort to C0, choosing to destroy himself along with Sasuke. Taking in a top-tier genin, and getting him to Jonin tier and beyond, making him a fully fledged Quasi-Kage in 2 years, proves Orochimaru's great capability as a teacher. After Yujao left with Anko, Ryo returned to the third training ground with Shisui. While his girl was important, he had to focus on his apprentice, who was also greatly important to him. He decided to teach him something new. Shisui had great talent for wind and fire release, suiting his status as an Uchiha. However, his talent with lightning was nothing out of the ordinary. However, Ryo was planning to teach him the lightning chakra mode today. As Ryo's apprentice, how could he not have that technique in his arsenal? Ryo started with the very basics. Yes, being a speed-type ninja should fit Shisui the best. However, speed on its own is not enough. Ryo, with his ice affinity, can make devastating attacks, which when paired with his regular ninjutsu and speed, could prove to be very powerful. Shisui, on the other hand, had no ice affinity. Therefore, Ryo wanted him to use the lightning chakra mode for the sake of strengthening his taijutsu and enhancing his attack power. Shisui's talent with lightning release was incomparable to his talent with the body flicker. After 3 whole days, he barely started to grasp infusing his cells with lightning chakra. Ryo felt somewhat helpless, but Shisui kept on working hard. On Yujao's side, being taught for 3 days by Orochimaru had a great impact on her. Orochimaru's method was simply getting head to face Anko. After learning Sage Mode, Anko could actually compete with a Quasi-Kage. Of course, even when not in Sage Mode, she was at the level of a Jonin. Yujao was no opponent to her by any means. Orochimaru never taught Anko anything such as mercy, so Yujao was being pummeled down by her for 3 days straight. Ryo secretly sneaked on them, and saw Yujao being hurt. While it was very distressing for him, he could clearly see Yujao's growth in her eyes. Before, Yujao's eyes were always faint, and she always seemed absent-minded. Now, she was serious about facing Anko as she had never been before. Yujao had grown up, that's what Ryo wanted. Even though he felt like objecting to Orochimaru's methods, he did not interfere. Ryo knew that he could not be omnipotent. He could only hope that Yujao would become strong enough to protect herself in his absence. This world he's in is full of hazards, and one must be capable of holding his own to survive. Chapter 137, New Battle. Before Ryo realized it, over half a month passed since he sent Yujao to work out with Orochimaru. During that time, Ryo devoted all his energy to help Shisui master the lightning chakra mode. While he wasn't that naturally talented with lightning release, there wasn't stopping Shisui's hard work. His lightning chakra mode began to be developed. After Shisui achieved the lightning chakra mode, Ryo felt that he had enough defensive capabilities to endure the battlefield. That was exactly where he was taking Shisui, to let him comprehend the cruelty of war. Ryo and Shisui went together to the 3RDS office. On their way, they met an Umbu going in the opposite direction. Ryo-san! Here you are! The Hokage-sama sent me to summon you into his office. Come with me. Seeing that he was summoned to the office, Ryo could no longer take Shisui along, so he sent him off and went with the Umbu. Oh, so fast, the third saw the two enter his office and was a bit surprised. Hokage-sama, I just left when I met Ryo-san. The Umbu explained. The third nodded and signaled him to leave. However, Ryo found out that he wasn't summoned there on his own, as Minato and Orochimaru were already there. Ryo linked his mind to the two, telepathically asking, Ni-san, Orochi-san, what happened? I don't know. I thought there was something wrong in the Wind Country, said Minato. When Sarutobi-sensei received the information, I was present. It's indeed a problem in the Wind Country, an alliance between the sand and the rock. Orochimaru explained to the two. Hearing about the alliance, Ryo knew that the Battle of Kikyo Pass was about to break out. Sure enough, the third confirmed Ryo's speculations. Orochimaru, Minato, Ryo, the final battle is on doors. Saying that, he gave the scroll he received to Orochimaru. The third read the information, and the third went on to say, by today, we've been in this Third World War for 6 years. During those 6 years, all major countries suffered heavy losses. This next battle should be the final decisive one. What do you think? After the three looked at each other, Orochimaru was the first to talk. Sarutobi-sensei, since those two sides made an alliance, unlike before, we should go all out, since we don't have to worry about the cloud. Orochimaru-san is right. However, I don't think that this battle will take place in the Wind Country. Oh? Explain your idea in detail, Minato. The third was intrigued by Minato's words. Even though the two sides are in alliance now, they had been in war forever by now. So what I think is that they would definitely pick a place where none of them has an advantage over the other. Their best bet is the border between the three countries. Minato pointed to the map on the side. Minato's analysis was very sound. The third and Orochimaru agreed, not to mention that Ryo knew about this all too well from the manga. The four stared at the map looking for the place where the battle might break out. Ryo, having the edge, was the first to locate it. It's Kikyo Pass. Ryo pointed at the pass, which was between the rock and fire countries, and not too far from the wind country. Yes. That should be it. The third, seeing all other options, was certain that Ryo's guess was right. Sarutobi-sensei, how many cage-tier ninjas do the rock and the sand have? Asked Orochimaru. After giving it some thought, the third said, they should have 7. The sand have the 4th Kaze Kage, Cho, Ebizo, and the Ichibai Jinchuriki Bunpyaku. The rock have Onaki, Kitsuki and the Gobi Jinchuriki, Han. Hearing that there were 7 cage-tier ninjas, Minato's face was a bit heavy. Besides him, Konoha had the 3rd Hokage, Sakumo, Jiraiya, Orochimaru, and Ryo. That made for only 6. Would it be necessary to bring in Kushina? Ryo noticed his worry, and quickly comforted him, Minato and I-san, cage-tier ninjas are not all in the same league. Cho and her brother are not that strong, we could have just one of us take care of them. The Jinchuriki should be rather tricky to handle, but we can beat them. The only troubling one is Onaki. If Onaki is the only problem, I'll handle him on my own, and I will certainly win. Minato's words surprised Orochimaru and the third a little bit. Onaki had the legendary dust release Kekkei Genkai. He was right there with the 3rd Hokage and 3rd Raikage in the league of the most powerful shinobi in the world, and Minato is confident in his victory. Minato, do you really have confidence in defeating Onaki? The third asked seriously. Minato nodded firmly, and the third, having this positive answer, laughed out loud. It seemed like that there was already another one in Konoha that could protect it from the mightiest dangers. In fact, it isn't only me, Orochimaru-san and Ryo could take care of him as well. At the very least, we would not be defeated. Orochimaru Minato was kidding, and revealed his usual smile. Ryo looked at him and said nothing. He did not know that Ryo had further developed his ice teleportation, and that now he should at least not lose to Onaki too quickly. However, Ryo felt that could even beat Onaki if using Sage Mode and the Lightning Chakram Mode to their full extent. With these techniques and his current level, Ryo felt confidence even to face the likes of the 6 Paths of Pain, let alone Onaki. Alright, enough with discussing strength and capabilities. Now, I'll appoint Orochimaru as chief commander of this battle. Minato and Ryo will assist him, and you will all lead 10,000 ninjas to assist Sakumo and Jiraiya. You also take Kushina along. You'll be setting off tomorrow. Yes, Hokage-sama. Well, if you have nothing else to say, start your preparations. The third said to the 3. Hokage-sama, wait a minute. Ryo, what else do you have? Asked the third. Hokage-sama, I want to bring Shisui along to the battlefield. After a few moments of silence, the third agreed to Ryo's request. He knew that the battlefield was the fastest way for a ninja to grow. When the 3 left the office, Shisui was still waiting under. After bidding farewell to Minato and Orochimaru, Ryo returned with his apprentice the 3rd training ground to practice some more. Alright, stop Shisui. Today's training is over. You will now immediately return to Yu Clan, prepare yourself, and join me tomorrow to participate in the next battle. Shisui stopped practicing and nodded firmly before leaving. After Shisui left, Ryo went to Orochimaru. He had learned that the latter wasn't intending on bringing Anko and Yujao, so Ryo wanted bid farewell to the latter before leaving. Chapter 138, Arrival at the Battlefield. After bidding farewell to Yujao, Ryo returned home and explained the situation to Chintz. Having nothing to say, she quietly packed her son's luggage. The next day, Konoha ninjas were assembled, with Orochimaru in the lead and Minato and Ryo on his left and right. Kushina and Minato's team were right behind the 3. Orochimaru wasn't good with speeches, he was the type that showed everything with his actions. Even so, Konoha's ninjas all had utmost respect to him. With the ones mentioned taking the lead, Konoha's ninjas started moving in a mighty spectacle towards their decisive battle. In the Wind Country's battlefield, Sakumo and Jiraiya noticed the movement of the rock and sand, and they immediately mobilized their troops to follow the 2 enemy camps to Kikyo Pass. The two Konoha troops arrived there at the same time. All of Konoha's cage tiers gathered in a tent to discuss their following actions. "Sakumo-san, do you have any information to share with us?" Orochimaru asked. Sakumo thought and said, "The only thing worth noting is the danger of the Sans puppet division, which we all know. The Hidden Rock seemed to have some movement in their camp recently, and it seems they're plotting something big. Either way, we should be extra careful." After a brief exchange of information, everyone formed a general understanding on the enemy's overall strength. The next step was assigning opponents. The 6 cage tiers in the camp were not that far off each other in terms of strength, with Sakumo and Minato being the stronger ones. Sakumo proposed that he should deal with Cho and Ebizo, and no one had any objections. Minato also suggested that he should handle Oniki. The others were then divided. Orochimaru was to face Bunpyaku, Jiraiya was to face Raza, Ryo was facing Kitsuke, and Kushina was to face Han. After the meeting, Ryo went to see the medical team, and on the way, he went and took Shisui along. Sakumo on the other hand went to where Kakashi and his friends were at. Minato and Kushina went to contact the heads of the main clans around, while Jiraiya remained with his old pal Orochimaru. Ryo was initially planning to arrange Shisui to remain with the medical team. However, the team was put off the battlefield. It was because the Sand, after Ebizo's arrival, always sent ninjas after Konoha's medical team. Sakumo was overwhelmed and couldn't defend them anymore, so he assigned all of them to remain behind and provide support from the back line. Therefore, Ryo had to put Shisui with the Uchiha clan. The Uchiha clan's representative on this battlefield was Fugaku Uchiha, an acquaintance of Ryo. The latter had no idea of how Fugaku's power evolved over the past few years. Ryo's perception capabilities were far beyond those of most. He perceived danger well. Facing Fugaku, he could feel that this man in front of him was extremely dangerous. As the man in front of him should be a quasi-cage tier by now, Ryo's feeling that he was so dangerous can be explained by one thing, and that is that Fugaku's Mangekyo had been awakened. Fugaku's Mangekyo didn't get much attention in the manga, and its specific power wasn't explained. However, it should at least have Amaterasu, which was already really powerful. Ryo actually liked Fugaku a lot after their encounters in the Wind Country battlefield. Just the eye contacts he gave him were enough for Ryo to be really grateful. Ryo was very curious about the Mangekyo as he greeted him, "Fugaku-san, I haven't seen you in a long time." "Long time no see, Ryo. I've been getting news of your growth over the course of the past few years. Your father would be very proud." Fugaku turned and smiled at the sight of Ryo. Ryo felt a bit awkward, as he didn't have any image of his father. He went on to discuss Shisui's matter. "Fugaku-san, can you please take care of my apprentice, Uchiha Shisui?" "Uchiha Shisui? You're took in an Uchiha as a disciple?" said Fugaku with some surprise. "Yes. Shisui, come in and say hello." Ryo nodded, and then invited Shisui in. Hearing Ryo, Shisui rushed in. He had heard the discussion between the two just now, and never expected his sensei to have such a good relationship with the man who was candidate to be the next Uchiha clan head. Although he had some doubts, Shisui was smart enough to not ask question about what he didn't need to know. He saluted his elder, "Hello, Fugaku-san. Pleasure to meet you. Well, you came in the right time. My son, Itachi, will be coming in a few days. When that happens you can get a companion," said Fugaku with a smile. Hearing Itachi's name, Ryo smiled, and was looking forward to meeting him. After all, he was a man that Ryo practically worshipped in his past life. After settling Shisui's matter, Ryo began to put his teleportation seals in several key places, and waited for the battle to begin. On the other hand, Jiraiya was bragging to Orochimaru about his new book. The latter was surprised to see that Jiraiya started writing. After reading a few pages, he felt it was dumb, and stopped reading. Like in the manga, the book was the tale of the utterly gutsy shinobi with summary of Jiraiya's hopes and ambitions. It was a shame that his writing style wasn't as good at the time, that almost no one liked it, and no one arrived to its signing at release. Orochimaru obviously wasn't interested in this novel, but out of friendship, he didn't ridicule Jiraiya. Another interesting conversation that took place was during the father-son meeting between Sakumo and Kakashi. Facing his father after such a long time, Kakashi's cold facade collapsed immediately. Their discussions were very simple. Both mostly asked each other about their current situation. Sakumo specifically asked about his wife. Hearing Kakashi say that she was doing well, Sakumo felt relieved. Then the two went on to spar. Kakashi's progress during that time wasn't small, but facing Konoha's White Fang, he could only be beaten with ease. At the end of that fight, Kakashi felt that his father was just too terrifyingly strong. He initially thought that his strength evolved enough to make the gap between them less pronounced. This battle, with his own growth in strength, Kakashi realized the gap between him and his father. He felt far behind. Sakumo, however, was very satisfied with his son's progress. He himself was not that strong at Kakashi's age. He felt the happiest knowing that his son was growing up and evolving. Chapter 139, Battle of Kikyo Pass, 1. While Konoha dealt with their own affairs, the sand and the rock were getting ready to attack them. Oniki and Raza have long awaited the arrival of Ryo and the other, as they were confident this time in their ability to crush the entirety of Konoha's forces. The two looked at the two figures behind them and laughed, and the two figures also showed a smile. Oniki took his sweet time planning for this battle. Before the rock's final battle with the cloud, Minato took back all his ninjas, making the rock face the cloud on their own. In that war, the rock had thousands of casualties and Oniki and Han were severely wounded. By the end of it, their troops in the Lightning Country were to be annihilated, if it wasn't for the cloud not being too eager to pursue, because of the destruction their village received during the war. Oniki, who escaped the fangs of death, had a new hatred born within him. While their previous battles against Konoha were mainly for resources, now, he was seeking a bloodbath. To fulfill his revenge, Oniki thought for a while before finally deciding to join forces with other villages to face Konoha. Konoha was leaving the war as the greatest beneficiary, and no village was prepared to accept that. Unfortunately for Oniki, the Cloud village was destroyed, and the third Raikage died at the rock's hands. The Cloud would certainly not want to fight again with the rock. As for the Mist, after the Mizukage's death, they had only left troops on the borders to prevent sudden attacks by Konoha. Therefore, the sand were Oniki's only option. While the two villages had their share of common hatred, Oniki had to get off his high horse and ask Raza for this alliance. Yesterday's enemies can become today's friends, animosity does not last forever, and only interest is absolute. The main common enemy today was Konoha. These ideas were understandable to the sand. So when Oniki suggested a truce between both sides, and joining forces against Konoha, Raza very happily agreed. After Raza agreed to fight Konoha, the two immediately began discussing their operational plan. However, as mentioned before, even with this new alliance, the two were in no way able to fully trust each other. After all, just a few days ago, they had been fighting each other on the battlefield. This sudden alliance made everyone unconsciously hold their guards. Even Raza had a hint of vigilance towards Oniki, until the latter exposed his biggest card to him. This way, their alliance was officially formed. After discussing their operational plan, Raza and Oniki went to appease the ninjas in their respective villages. Just like what happened in the third Hokage's office, the two sides looked at the map, and pinpointed Kikyo Hill as the perfect spot for this decisive battle. After reaching Kikyo-him, Konoha's troops immediately sent out the Hyoga and Aberame ninjas to monitor the rock and sand's every move. They could not afford to be sloppy, and while they were fully prepared for battle, they could only wait for the other side to make the first move. The battle had not yet officially started, but the atmosphere was absolutely tense. On the other side, Oniki was making the final arrangements. When it comes to battle experience, Oniki was a veteran compared to Raza, so most of the arrangements were based on his opinions. Raza, let's go for it, just like we discussed before. All right. This is battle that we must win, said Raza firmly. The rock and the sand began to move under the joint leadership of both cages. The mighty spectacle rushed towards the newly founded Konoha camp. As soon as they started moving, the Aberame and Hyoga ninjas realized that, and they immediately informed Orochimaru and the others. Ryo, and the rest if the cage tiers were well prepared, and the Battle of Kikyo Pass began. As planned, everyone found their opponents, and Minato and Ryo summoned Gamabunta and Gamahiro to assist Konoha's troops. Ryo's opponent was Oniki's son, Kitsuke. Ryo's opponent didn't do much in the manga, but he did leave quite the impression. Translator note, according to the fourth data book, he's from the Tsuchikage's bloodline. While not stated expressly, since Kuratsuki is the third Tsuchikage's granddaughter, it's most likely that Kitsuki is his son. From Narutopedia. Unlike his father, Kitsuke didn't have any Kekkei Genkai, let alone dust release. He mainly relied on his exceptional mastery of earth release. Ryo already knew that this wasn't a great opponent for him to deal with. Ryo, being the speed type, usually outpaced his opponents to get a chance at the kill shot. However, Kitsuke's earth release was too strong, allowing him, paired with his great perception abilities, to attack his opponent while remaining perfectly immune to their attacks. While Ryo was moving with his Ice Lightning Chakra mode, Kitsuke was not able to see him. However, he could perceive his overall position. Whenever Ryo got too close, a mud wall would stand between him and delivering a fatal blow to his opponent. For the first time, Ryo's Lightning Chakra mode was countered in this way. He was surprised and somewhat excited. Kitsuke's defense opened Ryo up to a new style of counter-fighting. This opponent didn't have to cope with Ryo's speed. He just needed to figure out how to make his attacks ineffective. This was no small feat. The only reason why Kitsuke was able to pull it off was his exceptional blend of exquisite perception skills and great mastery over earth release. It would be impossible for most ninjas to do this. This absolute defense from Kitsuke made Ryo give up on his usual style of winning with speed. Since speed can't be enough here, Ryo had to rely on strength to win. Ryo condensed a massive ice bow, much larger than usual, almost the same as the one that he used to finish the third Mizukage. Seeing Ryo's bow, Kitsuke didn't react much. He was still very confident in his earth release. No matter what jutsu Ryo was about to use, it wasn't going to break through his defense. Ryo used his chakra to make the bowstring, and then made natural energy gather madly on a small ice arrow. The amount of natural energy that gathered on the bow was getting exponentially higher. Even though Kitsuke couldn't perceive natural energy, he felt imminent threat from this ice arrow. He decided not to let Ryo get an edge, throwing a few large earth release attack on Ryo. Helplessly, the latter could only shoot out the ice arrow that had not been completed. The ice arrow shot right through those attacks, and in the blink of an eye, it was right in front Kitsuke. The latter quickly erected 3 consecutive mud walls, but they couldn't stop the arrow from landing. The ice arrow was mainly formed out of natural energy. It was virtually unbreakable, and easily penetrated through the mud walls and hit Kitsuke. The ice arrow bloomed and finally broke into ice dust under Ryo's control, and Kitsuke's figure disappeared altogether. Ryo wasn't confused by the scene in front of him. He easily perceived that Kitsuke quickly formed a mud clone right before being hit, and flickered to a stone pile not too far away. Kitsuke looked at the ice crystals in the air. They had only been in contact with his right hand, which got frostbitten in the blink of an eye. Chapter 140, Battle of Kikyo Pass, 2. Ryo's battle against Kitsuke was no small deal, and others naturally noticed it. The sand had been facing Kitsuke for quite some time. Cho and Ebiso had a clear idea of his level. Besides Raza, the two knew that the sand didn't have anyone who is opponent to him. What they didn't expect was that not so long after Ryo started fighting him, the Tsuchikage's son was the one seemingly losing. Ebiso pushed Sakumo back and said to Cho, "Ne-san, is this the new Yamanaka genius that you often mention? I haven't seen that brat for a few years, and his strength is already this terrifying." Cho said with a heavy face. Indeed, Konoha is a cradle of geniuses. First there were the Sunin, then Minato Namikaze. Now, there's this Ryo Yamanaka. I'm afraid we're not going to have it easy this day. Ebiso sighed. Alright. Instead of complaining, let's both go all out and kill Sakumo. I don't believe that he can really beat our brother-sister joint attack. Saying that, Cho manipulated her puppets and rushed towards Sakumo. Seeing his sister going forward, Ebiso put his frustration aside and attacked along with her. Back at Ryo's battle, Kitsuke's left hand was frostbitten, and he didn't have any sensation in it. Ryo thought he had his victory, but did not expect his opponent to have a hidden card. As soon as Ryo Lightning Chakra flickered to his foe, a massive stone giant broke out of the ground, with Kitsuke on top of its head. Oh, damn! This exists. The sudden appearance of the stone giant shocked Ryo. He wanted to use the Lightning Chakra flicker to escape, but found that the ground underneath him had been turned into mud by Kitsuke. You've been too arrogant, Ryo Yamanaka. Your time has come. As he said that, Kitsuke controlled the giant's massive fist to hit the ground. Bang! The fist was huge, and it directly pierced through the mud, shattering the ground underneath it. Kitsuka sensed the surroundings and found no trace of Ryo's chakra. He laughed ecstatically. In the distance, behind a stone, Ryo left his lighting chakra mode gasping. The giant, despite its massive size, was too fast. He was almost late to teleport to one of the ice scalpels he had buried in advance. Ryo took his time. Observing the giant, he found it was somewhat similar to Onaki's golem. Opening his Sharingan, Ryo saw the giant structure in details. He concluded that this giant must be an improved version of Onaki's golem. In comparison, the giant was even bigger, and much more flexible. It also sacrificed some of the golem's defensive capabilities, in exchange for a more powerful attack. After analyzing his enemy's technique, Ryo smiled, and his lightning chakra mode broke out as he flickered back to the battlefield. Kitsuka's face became heavy after seeing Ryo. He wasn't able to sense Ryo's chakra before, so how come he re-emerged in front of him once again? Ryo, not waiting for his foe to understand, threw an ice scalpel at the stone giant. Kitsuka, it's my turn. Ryo's voice just fell, when he disappeared in front of Kitsuka. The latter was surprised that his perception ability could not keep up with Ryo's speed. Ryo actually used his ice teleportation, and he reappeared at the ice scalpel that was planted on the giant's right leg. Immediately he hit that leg with a raise-non. Being hit on the leg, the stone giant lost balance, and its body trembled. Kitsuka increased chakra flow to the giant's leg to stabilize and repair it. But Ryo wasn't about to wait for that, hitting the left leg with another raise-non. In under 30 seconds, Ryo flickered back and forth between both legs, delivering dozens of raise-non to both of them, until the giant finally collapsed. That scene was witnessed by everyone on the battlefield. After a constant flashing of blue light, the stone giant turned in a pile of gravel. Kitsuka, who climbed out of that pile, had a feeling born within him, a feeling that this foe he was facing was invincible. Ryo suddenly stopped, looking in Minato's and Onaki's direction, who were fighting not too far away. Kitsuka sighed and took time to treat his right hand, while also looking in that direction. The battle between those two was fierce. Ryo knew Minato for so long, and he never saw him look so serious. Like Ryo, Minato was also a speed-type ninja. Onaki relied mainly on powerful ninjutsu, so it was reasonable for him to be restrained by Minato. But unlike most people, Onaki had the ability to fly, limiting the Flying Thunder God's efficiency. This battle was quite the challenge for Minato. Onaki remained in mid-air, constantly using all types of jutsus to force Minato to use the Flying Thunder God to the locations he keeps spared. As soon as Minato did that, a dust release attack would hit his new location. This Kekii Toda, dust release, attacks could disintegrate anything to a molecular level. Even Minato could only teleport out of its way. Facing such a strategy, Minato was pretty helpless. Even when he tried throwing Flying Thunder God Kunao, Onaki just disintegrated them in mid-air. It was clear to Minato that his current strategy was a dead end, and he needed to do something to end this situation. After hesitating for a while, his eyes became firm. He threw a smoke bomb where he was it, and then used Flying Thunder God to avoid Onaki's attack as he condensed a Raisin Shuriken in mid-air. After completing it, the smoke was also exhausted, and Minato threw his attack into the air. Onaki looked at this incoming jutsu with a heavy face. He sensed, out of experience, that this technique held a deadly threat. He attacked it using dust release, but he didn't expect that it wouldn't break it down. Seeing the attack getting closer and closer, he quickly dodged to the left. All his attention was drawn to that deadly technique, and he didn't notice the kunao that were flying nearby. As soon as he dodged to the left, Minato teleported to where he was it. By the time he noticed Minato's sudden attack, it was too late for Onaki to react, and he received a raise-non right to his waist. Only an explosion was heard, followed with a scream. Onaki fell from midair, holding his waist, within a cover of smoke he made at the last moment. The smoke on the ground hadn't completely dissipated. Minato cautiously threw a Flying Thunder God Kunao within it, and waited until its exhaustion. As soon as he saw Onaki's figure, Minato smiled. He teleported behind Onaki, placing a kunao on his neck. The latter fiercely stared at Minato, as his hands began forming a shining cube. Minato smiled again, and teleported with him in front of Han. He then grabbed Kushina and disappeared instantly. Boom! After a huge explosion, Han was blown 10 meters away. Minato, what's going on? Kushina was a bit puzzled. Minato did not explain, but in his right hand, he condensed a raise-non, and immediately moved to Onaki's side, hitting his waist again. Chapter 141, Battle of Kikyo Pass, 3. Everyone in vicinity heard Onaki's screams, and their eyes were on this battle that seemed to be most important. What they never expected was Onaki's defeat. The man with the Kekii Toda, great mastery over most jutsu, and the strongest ninja in the Earth Country actually lost. At everyone's sight, Onaki was hit by Minato's second raise-non, and the Sand Rock Alliance on the battleground went silent. He's terrible. Konoha's yellow flash is terrible. A rock ninja broke through the silence, with a terrified voice. This ninja was one of the few to survive the Battle of the Lightning Country. He was strong, a jonin, and had been hearing of Minato's power ever since his days on that battleground. Now, in Kikyo Pass, he's finally encountering Minato. He had never expected the rumors to be true, and that Minato had already surpassed all 5 Kage. Konoha's ninjas cheered after seeing Minato defeating Onaki, and the highest level battle on the battleground was already won by Konoha. Haha! Raza, you're going down this time. Even old man Onaki was taken down by my apprentice. Jiraiya laughed with mockery and pride. Raza said nothing, grunting and controlling the gold sand to surround Jiraiya. My apprentice has won, I have to show I'm worthy of being his sensei, Senpo, Gomen. The hot flames immediately melted all the gold sand. On the other side, Onaki, being hit by 2 consecutive raise-non to the waist, couldn't even stand up straight. You're worthy of your title, Yellow Flash. This time, you've defeated this old man, but Konoha will never emerge from this victorious. Unable to fight anymore, Onaki cut off the part of his clothes that Minato marked. Supporting his waist, he levitated and flew away. Minato hesitated at first, and then chased him. It was no time for him to sympathize with the elderly. If he managed to finish the Tsuchikage, this war will end. Just as he was about to catch up with Onaki, he felt a terrible heat wave from behind. Minato stopped immediately, and teleported away. Looking back, he found someone surrounded by magma. From this person, Minato felt a horrible chakra, and enough heat to burn all surroundings. When Ryo saw this figure, his face changed greatly. He was clearly a new Yanbai Jinchuriki. He didn't expect the rock to recapture that Biju so quickly. Ryo linked his mind to Minato's, and telepathically said, "Ni-san, this is the Yanbai Jinchuriki, you must be careful." Learning that, Minato realized that he wasn't about to kill Onaki anytime soon. "Onaki, so that's your hidden card. Brat, don't be so conceited." "Kakuzu, I will increase your reward by 30%. Onaki said. "So you say." From behind a boulder not so far away, a ninja wearing the slashed forehead protector of the waterfall village slowly walked towards Minato, Onaki, and the new Yanbai Jinchuriki. Although Minato did not know this approaching person, he could clearly sense that he was a Kage tier ninja judging by his chakra, and one who's not that inferior to Onaki. "Who are you? You're not a rock ninja." Hearing Minato, Kakuzu laughed out loud saying, "Kid, didn't anyone teach you to respect your elders? I'm from your first Hokage's generation, you know." "That's impossible. That would mean that you're over 80 years old." "Who are you?" Of course, Minato was in disbelief. "I was sent to assassinate Hashirama in the past. I wouldn't bother to lie about such a thing." Kakuzu was somewhat contemptuous. "Assassinate the first Hokage?" Minato looked at him in amazement, and was shocked for a while. As soon as Kakuzu appeared, Ryo used his spiritual power to link the minds of all of Konoha's Kage tier ninjas. "Orokai-san, who's this person, do you know?" "Kakuzu, if that's Kakuzu, then yes, I do know him. He's an S-class missing nin from the waterfall village. He's a bounty hunter that loves money, and he's been in the oldest of bingo books." Orochimaru told everyone everything he knew. "How can he still be alive?" Back in the day, after the battle in the Valley of the End, the first Hokage was seriously injured. After returning to Konoha, he wasn't in as good shape as before. At this time, there was an assassin sent after him, and that's Kakuzu. Jiraiya continued with what he knew. "How about his power level?" Thinking that this person assassinated the first Hokage, Kushina was concerned. "Strength?" "Well, all he did was throw a kunai at the first Hokage. And then he was scared away by the latter's chakra and fled away." Sakumo said with a sneer. "Oh, that's the assassination he's so proud about." Kushina was speechless. Of course he'd be proud to live. The power of the first Hokage is something beyond you youngsters' understanding, said Jiraiya. Jiraiya-san, you also haven't seen the first Hokage either, or did you? Said Ryo. Jiraiya coughed and didn't answer. Hearing that, Minato felt a lot more at ease. If all what happened was throwing a kunao at Hashirama, he shouldn't be so worried. Determining Kakuzu's current strength, Minato decided to go all out on him first. Kakuzu was already under a flying thunder god kunao. Minato did not hesitate, teleported there and broke through his heart with a raise non. Kakuzu obviously wasn't expecting such speed. He didn't have time to react, and lost a heart before he even started fighting. From the manga, Ryo knew already what should be done to kill Kakuzu, all 5 of his hearts should be destroyed, and Minato hit only one. Kid, you're very good. Your heart shall suit me well. Kyukazu's right arm was clad with lightning, reaching for Minato's heart. Seeing his enemy's agile movement, and him showing no signs of dying, Minato was astonished, teleporting immediately to his initial location. Kyukazu was annoyed, saying, "Damn it, this time-space jutsu is really convenient." Just as Minato returned to his initial position, the Yonbai Jinchuriki started attacking from the side as well, and Minato's foothold got surrounded by magma. Helpless, he could only teleport again. Onaki, that this guy, he cannot get away from us. Kushina, Ryo, whoever of you can take down his opponent first, go and support Minato, said Jiraiya telepathically. I know Jiraiya-san. I'm already on it. Saying that, Ryo began to gather lightning chakra in his right hand, while a crystal-clear ice blade appeared in his right hand. Chapter 142, Battle of Kikyo Pass, 4. The ice blade in Ryo's hand was surrounded by lightning chakra. As it flickered, Kitsuke felt the immense lightning chakra within it, and he had shivers. I must not be cut by that, or I'll really die. Kitsuke, the Kage tier veteran, had a very accurate judgment. Ryo had named this technique the Ice Lightning Blade, which revolved around getting an ice blade into a state similar to the lightning chakra mode. The blade itself is mainly a condensation of natural energy. Adding lightning chakra mode on top of that, effectively made lightning a carrier to that energy. Lightning carried natural energy is a terrible existence to all those with no experience with natural energy. Once the lightning chakra made contact with a body part, the effect wouldn't be local. It would actually go beyond the contact point to completely destroy the body part it came into contact with. Ryo had developed this technique quite a long time before, and had been keeping it as one of his hidden cards. He was actually intending on keeping it for the Kyuubi's attack night. Now, in order to go to Minato's help, he could only show it this too soon. Although Kitsuke's right hand hadn't completely recovered, he was able to move it normally. Sensing that Ryo was about to attack, he was already prepared to defend himself. Ryo made the first move. He chose to use ice to teleport directly. Unlike his lightning chakra flicker, ice teleportation was like a space-time ninjutsu, and Kitsuke was unable to detect it. Ryo teleported behind Kitsuke, where there was a scalpel he had left before destroying the stone giant. Kitsuke was watching Ryo's movement closely. As soon as the latter disappeared, the Tsuchikage Sun was prepared in advance. Earth Release, Great Moving Earth Core. Kitsuke's jutsu greatly raised the surface, changing the landscape. This made Ryo's first strike hit the ground. What? Kitsuke glanced at the ground around the ice lightning blade attack and gasped. A large area of the ground was covered by frost, and an electrical spark went through the ice, creating an explosion, and bursting the ground into black smoke. Kitsuke panicked. What would happen if he was the one to receive this cut? How much better would he be compared to the ground? Thinking about that, he just gave up. Any small mistake he made from now on meant imminent death. Ryo Yamanaka, you've won. I admit defeat. I quit this battle. Ryo stopped attacking. Kitsuke from the manga left a good impression on him, and he decided to believe him. Ryo ran past his opponent, rushing straight towards the corner in the direction of the Yonbai Jinchuriki. Kitsuke kept his promise and left the battlefield. On his way, Ryo told Minato that he had already handled Kitsuke, and that he was going his way. Minato was still in a pinch facing the Yonbai Jinchuriki and Kakuzu. He was able to dodge with ease, but he wasn't getting any window to attack. The Yonbai Jinchuriki relied on his practically infinite chakra to arbitrarily splatter lava around, forcing Minato to move erratically, while Kakuzu used the windows that his colleague opened to attack Minato. During this period, Minato also found Kakuzu was using lightning, wind, fire, and water release as if they were his main affinities. Ryo quickly rushed to the place where the three were fighting. He didn't rush to attack, but first contacted Minato. "Minato Ni-san, I'm here." Minato heard Ryo's voice and felt finally relieved. With Ryo joining his side, it was finally time to counter-attack. "Ryo, you should wait. Kakuzu is by no means a weakling, and the Yanbai itself is sure to be familiar with you. Although the new Jinchuriki is not perfect yet, he should not be underestimated." Minato and Ryo's thoughts coincided. These two are not easy to deal with, and to beat them, they needed to play smart. "Ryo, one more thing. This person, Kakuzu, is extraordinary. I have already crushed through his heart, and he's still alive." Minato shared the information he had with Ryo. Ryo pretended to contemplate, then answered, "Ni-san, perhaps his heart is on the right side. We'll attack his right side or his head for a while, and we should be fine." "Well, that should be the only possibility. Next, I'll create opportunities for you. Use your speed to finish Kakuzu, and then, we'll deal with the Yanbai." "Alright, I understand." After discussing their plan, Minato's counter-attack began. As he was forced to teleport once again, Minato went to a new mark that he had made nearby, and he disappeared from his opponent's eyes. Both Kakuzu and the Yanbai Jinchuriki were shocked, and they began to trace him. It was at this time that Minato reappeared in a place that they had never imagined. Behind the Yanbai, Minato's right condensed an Udama raise non, and he directly hit the Yanbai Jinchuriki's body. Even with the lava release chakra mode and the Yanbai's chakra protection, the Jinchuriki was injured. Red Biju chakra emerged from within his body, healing the wound. The constant erosion created by the raise non forced the Biju chakra to constantly heal the wound, making the Jinchuriki start to lose control. As Minato was preparing for a bigger attack, Kakuzu came from the side. Minato already knew that he was coming, but he faked being caught up in the moment, not being able to see the approaching threat. Kakuzu thought that he was free to move in, and he directly went for an all-out lightning jutsu aimed at Minato. As for the Jinchuriki's life, that didn't matter one bit to Kakuzu. After all he had to do was to kill Minato, then take his money and leave. "Ryo, now!" As soon as Kakuzu launched his lightning ninjutsu, Minato teleported to where Ryo was at. Ryo, who was hiding, had made his full preparations. He flickered behind Kakuzu, and aimed his ice lightning blade to the back of his neck. Ryo knew all about Kakuzu's secret. If he was to aim to the right, he might only be able to destroy one heart. If he directly went for the head, he might get a chance to kill. Kakuzu had a lifetime of experience, and could feel a threat one was coming. Just as the ice lightning blade was about to cut his head off, he dodged, evading a deadly hit. Nevertheless, he was slashed, and massive amounts of lightning chakra carrying natural energy poured into his body, while its surface was covered in frost. It didn't take long before his body got ravaged by the violent lightning chakra. Ryo didn't hesitate, and immediately throwing second knife at Kakuzu, but that hit the ground. The damaged Kakuzu was still able to make a clone and flicker away. His current location had no ice scalpel, and no flying thunder god Kunao. He looked back at Ryo with his eyes full of hatred, turned around and left. Ryo wanted to chase him, but he was stopped by Minato. The Yanbai Jinchuriki was still there, and he was the one posing the bigger threat to Konoha's ninjas. Chapter 143, Battle of Kikyo Pass, 5. After the Jinchuriki was injured by Minato, he used too much of the Biju's chakra. This new Jinchuriki had a really bad relationship with Son Goku, so his consciousness was soon taken over by the Yanbai. After the Yanbai took over his host's body, chakra oozed out of it, getting it to enter the tailed coat mode, and then turning him into the Yanbai. "Ha ha ha! I'm finally able to emerge again." The Yanbai laughed. Looking back at Son Goku's usual behavior, Ryo felt that this laughter was out of his usually character. Normally, this would something that the Ichibai would say. However, Ryo understood this behavior. After all, it's inevitable that one would burst out like this when leaving a state of captivity that they entered just a few days after regaining their freedom. "Ryo, now is no time to be in a daze. Work with me to get this guy out of the battlefield." Minato saw Ryo lost in thought, and he quickly scolded him. Hearing Minato, Ryo immediately came back to his senses. "Ni-san, the two of us are more than enough to bring down the Yanbai. There is no need to transfer it," said Ryo. "We need to be careful. It's a Biju after all, and the Yanbai's lava would be lethal for ordinary ninja." Ryo didn't disagree with Minato, who immediately began to form a ground seal to make an area teleportation barrier, while Ryo was responsible of keeping the Biju busy. After the Yanbai vented for a while, he calmed down and looked at Ryo and Minato. "It's you. You wicked brat. You've killed Rashi. Lave release, flower, fruit mountain." Seeing the enemy who killed Rashi, the Yanbai raged, releasing a massive lava release jutsu at Ryo. While he wasn't exactly in harmony with his old Jinchuriki, with the two often quarreling, Son Goku had been with Rashi for over 20 years. So to him, he was the closest thing possible to a friend. Therefore, seeing Rashi's killer made his blood boil. The Yanbai, being a Biju, had practically infinite chakra. That, coupled with his hatred to Ryo, made his attacks particularly fierce. Ryo was helpless, he could only use ice teleportation to avoid the lava, all while being careful not to get Konoha's ninjas in the crossfire. "Ni-san, are you not ready yet? If you don't hurry, I'll be getting cooked in here," Ryo shouted at Minato. "Patience, I'll be ready soon." Minato also sounded anxious, as he was fully aware of Ryo's state. "Since that's the case, then I shall give this guy a little lesson." After Ryo finished his words, he condensed a small ice bow. Unlike before, Ryo's new arrows were made out of ice, but of lightning chakra instead. While they weren't as destructive as his ice arrows, they were much faster to launch and traveled much faster. Ryo shot a few lightning arrows in a row at the Yanbai. While the attack didn't do any real damage, it still have a paralyzing effect that bothered the Yanbai to the extreme. "Wicked brat!" The Yanbai just ignored Ryo's attacks, and started forming a Biju Dama that was aimed at Konoha's ordinary ninjas, as he discovered that all Ryo was doing was covering up for them. Konoha's ninjas also noticed the Biju Dama pointed at them, and they instantly panicked. It was a Biju Dama, something that they have no way to deal with. "This guy is smart. Minato Ni-san, do you have way to stop it?" asked Ryo. "I'm about to finish my preparations, I can't stop now. Please Ryo, find a way to handle it on your own." Ryo was helpless, and he could only hit head. As the Biju Dama was about to be launched, Ryo used ice teleport to get in front of Konoha's ninjas. "Everyone, point all the water you can produce at me, now." Ryo turned back to Konoha's ninjas and shouted. Everyone heard the order, and without hesitation, they all used their water release ninjutsus. The amount of water gathered from hundreds of small to medium-sized water release jutsus was huge. Ryo froze the water, controlling most of it to form 3 massive ice shields. The remaining formed an ice wall to fend off the aftermath of the explosion. Understanding the power of the Biju Dama, Ryo didn't stop there. Even though he had 3 ice shields and an ice wall, he still felt that it wasn't enough. Ryo entered Sage mode, and condensed a Raisin Shuriken. At this time, the Biju Dama was also completed. At the same time of its, Ryo released the Raisin Shuriken. The two attacks collided in midair, and the Raisin Shuriken did manage to offset a portion of the power of Biju Dama, making it much smaller than its initial size. Boom! The Biju Dama hit the first shield, easily breaking through it. The second did manage to fend it off for a good while before ultimately being crushed as well. The third shield stood against the attack for what seemed like an eternity, and eventually the Biju Dama didn't go through and exploded. The ice wall behind the shield took the impact from the explosion, and none of Konoha's ninjas was harmed. Ryo ice teleported back to where the Yanbai used to be, and continued to stall it. Unlike the Kyuubi, the Yanbai wasn't capable to use consecutive Biju Dama without rest. Without that threat, Ryo was more comfortable dealing with it. Complete. Ryo, let's both transfer this beast. Minato finally completed the teleportation barrier. Ryo nodded, and following Minato instructions, he injected chakra to a seal he stepped on, and the jutsu was performed instantly. Ryo, Minato, and the Yanbai all disappeared from the battlefield. Somewhere near a river far away, they instantly reappeared. Minato chose the target location to be near a riverside to give Ryo the water he needed to get an edge over the Yanbai. The beast was still a little puzzled by everything that had just happened, when Ryo and Minato started attacking. This time, Minato was the one fighting the beast, while Ryo was supposed to make use of the water around him to help Minato by offsetting the lava's effect. Minato didn't have any worries facing the beast. Using his speed and consecutive raise non, he was able to fully occupy the Yanbai. The beast was in a pinch against such an opponent. Without any way to keep up with his speed, the beast couldn't do anything. However, as soon as Minato got an edge, Ryo stopped assisting him and formed an ice bow. An ice arrow appeared on the bow. While pulling it back, Ryo gathered natural energy within the arrow, making it more and more transparent. Minato was also a Mount Myaboku contractor. While he hadn't completed his Sage Mode training at the time, he was also sensitive to Naruto energy. He sensed that in the arrow that was barely the length of an arm, there was an immense amount of natural energy. Once such a thing exploded, it should even be enough to kill the Yanbai. Knowing what Ryo had in stores, Minato could only cooperate with him. Chapter 144, Battle of Kikyo Pass, 6. Minato did his best to control the beast, constantly attacking the Yanbai with Raise Non. Son Goku was much stronger, but Minato wasn't giving him the slightest window to make an attack. On terms of speed and flexibility, the two weren't even in the same league. However, Minato's attacks weren't making any substantial damage to him, so the Yanbai didn't care much. Suddenly, he felt a deadly threat, a force that's enough to kill him. Although the beast would never die forever, the feeling of death was something that he didn't want to feel again. He immediately went on a rampage, releasing lava all around him. Just as Minato started to become exhausted, Son Goku realized who it was bringing him this deadly threat. "Wicked brat, it's you!" The Yanbai became even more agitated, rushing at Ryo desperately. A smile appeared on the corner of Ryo's mouth, as he released the ice arrow that he had already prepared. The arrow broke through the air, landing on the Yanbai in the blink of an eye. That's when Ryo controlled it to explode. Then, he and Minato blinked, hiding in the distance. This arrow was the one with most natural energy that Ryo had ever created. Even he had no idea about the extent of its power. The arrow exploded in the Yanbai's body, and then natural energy that lost its vessel expanded, engulfing the entirety of the Yanbai, and freezing him for the inside out. The Yanbai, becoming an ice sculpture, had already lost consciousness at this time, and the ice arrow ravaged through its body, and chakra began to dissipate from within it. Eventually, with the sound of shattering ice, the Yanbai was split into halves, which in turn crumbled into ice crystal, and the Yanbai was killed again by Ryo. "Hey! Ryo, that jutsu of yours is terrible." Minato looked at the Yanbai's chakra dissipating and gasped. "Calm down, Ni-san, it is but a jutsu." Ryo tilted his head, showing Minato he didn't care much about that. "This is beyond of me calming down. This is a Biju killer jutsu, with seemingly no side effects. Don't you think it's terrifying?" Ryo scratched his head, acting clueless. Minato sighed helplessly, thinking, he's just too young to appreciate what he had just done. But he wasn't going to say anything more about it. Only the two of them were here, meaning that no one needed to know how strong this jutsu was. Then Minato returned to the battlefield with Ryo. After they left, a white figure on the ground flashed away. Back on the battlefield, neither Minato nor Ryo engaged in battle immediately. They both stood on the side observing the situation on the battlefield. Jiraya's battle against Raza was coming to an end, with Raza having little to do against his enemy. Ever since Jiraiya brought out Sage Mode against him, Raza had been successfully suppressed in every battle, but never killed. Sakumo had a bit of a disadvantage against the two siblings fighting him, but he wasn't about to lose anytime soon either. The battle between Orochimaru and Bunpyaku was already over. Just like what happened against the Yanbai before, Orochimaru manda's venom to paralyze the Ichibai's body and then beat it. The Ichibai lost consciousness, collapsing. Because Orochimaru didn't wake Bunpyaku up, the Ichibai was there on the ground in plain sight. Now Orochimaru, Minato, and Ryo were all observing the state of the battlefield. When Ryo turned his attention to Kushina's side, he found that her battle was also one-sided. This time, Kushina didn't use the Biju mode, but instead fought in tailed coat mode, while the Gobi was in full Biju mode. However, Kushina already had 8 tails out. Her chakra was already several times more than that of Han. In that state, she was in version 2, and didn't keep her human appearance. Her whole body was blood red, and 2 fox ears appeared upon her head, while her hands also turned into claws. If it wasn't for her sneer from time to time, Ryo would have doubted that she had been overtaken by Kurama. On the other side, Minato could no longer look away after seeing Kushina. While she was manhandling the gobe, Minato was still looking worried. As for Kushina, she was complaining to Kuruma. Oi, Kuruma! I'm a girl. How could you do this? This eight-tailed look is ugly. Hey! Do you know how many people tried to use my power without me allowing them? Kurama said proudly as he licked his tail. I don't care, I just want to finish this guy already so I could look normal again. Kushina was acting like a rascal, but Kurama didn't pay any attention to that. It was because of his memories from the Ryamayaku's incident, the ones that Minato's seal wasn't able to suppress. He already knew that there were some people who are bound to come, seeking to control Kushina. He had to make Kushina capable of controlling his full strength as soon as possible. He thought, if that was to happen, no one would be able to fully control him, even an Uchiha. If the Biju and the Jinchuriki become able of working together, their joint strength wouldn't be the simple sum of its parts. The Kyuubi is the most powerful of all Biju. If Kushina was to fully control its power, then she would be able to beat any user of the Susanoo. Author note, this is based on the fact that Naruto was able to fight on par with Sasuke's perfect Susanoo, with just one half of Kurama. Although she didn't understand why Kurama was so strict with her, Kushina believed that he would never harm her. She had been working very hard to master his power, and Kurama was very pleased with this. Today's battle is the stage where the result of their hard work shall appear. If the Kyuubi helped her conquer his negative emotions, it would be like helping a student cheat on an exam. In that case, if someone else would try to forcibly control him, she wouldn't be able to do anything. Kushina, while being a little bit silly, didn't have her mind wrapped on Kurama. She focused on the gobe, just to end this as soon as possible and leave this state. The gobe kept being on the defense. The Kyuubi's chakra was too horrible, and any attempt from him to attack would result in him getting a critical hit. Kushina became serious. While the gobe was being beaten, he was really hanging on. She threw him into the air, and then attacked him before even giving the poor thing a chance to fall. Seeing that, Minato was relieved, and stopped having doubts about Kushina's chances to win. Ryo looked away from that fight, and then quickly turned back. His eyes were shining bright, as he just had a new idea. This was a perfect chance to collect the chakra of 2 Biju. Chapter 145, Battle of Kikyo Pass, 7. After talking with Minato, Ryo rushed to where Orochimaru was. The Gobe's battle with Kushina wasn't settled yet, and Ryo decided to go ahead and collect the Ichibi's chakra. At this time, Orochimaru was observing Jiraiya's sage mode. He had encountered Ryo's and Anko's sage modes already, and he felt that Jiraiya's mode was somewhat different from the two. Orochi-san, what are you looking at? Ryo's voice interrupted Orochimaru's thoughts. If it was someone else interrupting Orochimaru's thoughts, they would receive a very bad death. However, this was Ryo, and Orochimaru actually asked him about his concerns instead. Ryo-kun, Jiraiya's sage mode seems to be different from yours and Anko's. His appearance had changed drastically, and he can maintain it for a lot longer. That. It's because Jiraiya-san's sage mode is not perfect. He needs the 2 great sage toads in order to attain it. They allow him not only to enter sage mode, but also to maintain it with no time limit as they harness natural energy for him. Ryo explained to Orochimaru the advantages and disadvantages of Jiraiya's sage mode. After listening to his answer, Orochimaru lowered his head and remained silent as he thought it over. Soon after, he looked as if he gave up on understanding something. He raised his head and asked Ryo, Ryo-kun, what brought you to me? I want your help Orochi-san, to harness Shikaku's chakra and give me some of it. Orochimaru didn't hesitate to nod and agreed. He directly pulled out his sword of Kusanagi and cut off the Ichibi's tail. Unlike the Wind Country, most of Kikyo Pass's terrain was made out of stone. Only a small portion of Shikaku's body was sand, the rest was churka. The place where a Biju's chakra is most focused is his tail. Orochimaru naturally knew this, so he went straight for it. Ryo quickly pulled out his sealing scroll, and sealed the tail within it. The chakra was supported with the sand and maintained its integrity. All right. Thank you for the help Orochi-san. Orochimaru didn't answer, and got back to observing Jiraiya's battle. Looking at where he was staring, Ryo also saw the state of that battle. In face of Jiraiya's offense, Raza could not get the upper hand, and could only rely on the defense provided by the gold sand, barely resisting his opponent. Ryo felt that this battle was about to turn into Jiraiya full victory at any moments, so he turned his attention to Sakumo, Ebizo and Cho. While Cho and Ebizo were pretty old, they were still veteran cage tier ninjas and had rich combat experience. On top of that, they are brother and sister, and had been fighting together since their childhood. It was natural that they had an amazing fighting harmony. Neither of them was a worthy opponent of Sakumo. However, facing them together, even the White Fang wasn't enough to bring them down. Cho also had her motive of taking revenge against her son and daughter-in-law's killer. Ebizo naturally sympathized with his sister's feelings. Sakumo could only play hide and seek with the two. That was the only way to guarantee that he would not lose to the two. However, Ryo felt that Sakumo wasn't going to lose anyway, so he turned his attention to the Gobi's fight against Kushina. The Gobi was in a situation similar to that of Raza, but it was only worse. At least, Raza was able to defend himself, but the Gobi was standing there as a punching bag. However, just by the merit of being a Biju, he was very resilient. Anyone else would have long surrendered in this kind of state. Seeing that this battle had already been won, Ryo saluted Orochimaru and went to Kushina. It was just as he arrived that the Gobi lost consciousness and fell to the ground. "Hey Ryo! What are you doing here?" Kushina saw Ryo and asked curiously. "I'm here to collect a part of the Gobi's chakra," Ryo answered. "Why do you want the Gobi's chakra?" "If you need a Biju's chakra, I'll lend you that of Kurama." Kushina looked at the Gobi on the ground disdainfully. "Kushina, I'm taking over. I have a few questions to ask the kid." Kushina was about to say that the Gobi was trash, when she was interrupted by the Kyuubi. Kushina could only give control to Kurama. After he took over, Kurama immediately controlled chakra back to Kushina's body, and she returned to her normal appearance. But the scarlet pupils in her eyes showed that he was in control. He shielded Kushina's perception and directly asked Ryo, "Kid, why are you collecting the Biju's chakra?" Kurama sounded serious, and Ryo knew what he was worried about. He didn't want to lie to him and directly said, "To become stronger, to protect those who are important to me." Kurama stared at Ryo, and felt the sincerity in his words. After some silence, he continued to ask, "Is Kushina one of those important people?" "Of course, not just Ni-san, you as well," Ryo answered without hesitation. The Kyuubi's perception of good of evil told him that Ryo's words were completely from the heart. This answer took the value off of all his other questions. "Protect me? Kid, you're still a 100 years too young to protect me." Saying that, Kurama returned Kushina's body to her. Ryo laughed. Kurama was exactly the same as he was in manga, just big mean fox. After taking back control over her body, she went on and took out the middle tail off the Gobi following the Kyuubi's instructions. After Ryo sealed that tail, he was ready to take the scroll and go. However, Kushina suddenly entered the tailed coat mode, with 3 tails appearing behind her. "Ryo, Kurama asked me to hand you this part of his chakra." After saying that, Kushina took out a scroll, sealed the chakra and handed it to Ryo. Just in one day, Ryo managed to collect chakra from 3 Biju. The most important thing was that he got the chakra of the Kyuubi as well. Now he already had the Ichibais, the Yanbais, the Gobis, and the Kyuubi's chakra. Ryo was collecting this chakra for a very simple reason, keeping an ace up his sleeve. Moreover, he didn't take much of their chakra, and the Biju should recover in a few days. His actions had little effect on them. However, his plan wasn't just getting the Biju's chakra and keeping it in those scrolls. Ryo was seeking the opportunity to see the legendary Rikudo Sennin, so it was best to get a part of the Gadomazo. Pairing the Biju's chakra with Juobi's body just makes sense. Moreover, with his ice teleportation and teleportation barrier, Ryo was confident that even when facing Madara, he should manage to at least leave safely. Chapter 146, Battle of Kikyo Pass, Finale. Soon after Kushina beat the Gobi, Jiraiya's battle against Raza also came to end as well. Raza was seriously injured. As Jiraiya was about to deliver the final blow, Raza shielded himself with gold sand and escaped. Finding out that the alliance has been defeated on all levels, from ordinary ninjas to cage tiers, Cho and Ebizo also chose to retreat. As these 3 backed down, they gave orders to the sand ninjas to withdraw, and they did so, led by their village's Jonins. This time, Konoha's ninja chose not to let them go, and chased them even after the victory, led by Minato and Jiraiya. The rest of Konoha's ninjas, under the leadership of Sakumo and Orochimaru, were to deal with the remaining rock ninjas. However, due to the location of Kikyo Pass, the closest country was the Earth country, so many of the rock ninjas retreated in advance, leaving behind only 2,000 of their companions. These 2,000 were left alone, so they didn't intend to go back alive. All of them rushed straight at Konoha's ninjas. In order to reduce any possible casualties, Sakumo and Orochimaru joined the battle. 2,000 men, led by a few jonin, were facing 2 cage tiers. It took no time for them to be completely annihilated. The next step was clearing the battlefield. Orochimaru was directing the actions of all ninjas, while Ryo led his medical team to look for any survivors that can be rescued. The medical team searched for survivors, witnessing the cruelty of war. At this time, near body of a sand ninja, the figure of a small arm moved. A woman in the medical team noticed this struggling arm. But she hesitated to rescue it, as it was near the corpse of an enemy ninja. Ryo sensed she was acting abnormally and looked back at her. Ryo didn't have any impression of this medical ninja. She wasn't one of the medics that he had brought. However, he asked about what was bothering her anyway. She mentioned the small arm, and Ryo used his perceiving abilities and sensed that there was really life in there. Ryo motioned Ming Hyaga to hold the child up and bring him. Because they were on the battlefield, the medical ninjas were even nervous when approaching injured children. However, after the kid was brought by Ming, they were relieved to see that this child should not be feared. What kind of threat could a 3- or 4-year child pose to them? Ryo began his treatment immediately. The kid's injury was not heavy, but his head received a heavy blow. With Ryo's treatment, he quickly regained his consciousness. At this time, Ryo felt that the child was familiar. He kept looking at him, thinking that he had seen this silver grey hair before. The female medical ninja saw the child wake up, and asked him very gently, "Child, who are you? What's your name? Where is your family?" The kid looked clueless, as a fool, looking at the sky, and not answering. After a good while questioning the child, he did not answer. Ryo could only leave him in the care of the female ninja. He went on, and continued his search for other survivors. After a long search, he returned, and found the female medic holding the sleeping boy. "So, has this child been identified?" asked Ryo, whispering. "Ryo-san, this child has lost his memory. He remembers nothing. I intend to adopt him into my orphanage," the medic answered. "Your orphanage? What is your name?" Ryo thought of something, but he wasn't sure. "My name is No Yakushi, the caretaker at the village's orphanage," she answered. Hearing her name, Ryo understood why that child looked familiar. In the manga, he was another one besides Naruto to successfully achieve Sage Mode. He had used Edo Tensei to launch the Fourth World War, and he was able to give the 2 Uchiha brothers a hard time. If it wasn't for the strength of the amazing Genjutsu, Izanami, Kabuto might have been able to erase Itachi's consciousness, subdue Sasuke, and rewrite the fate of the world of shinobi. Thinking of the future, the idea of killing this child popped into Ryo's mind, but he quickly dismissed it. No matter what happens in the future, Kabuto right then was still just a child, and Ryo could not bring himself to do such a thing. Moreover, Ryo was very confident in himself. Even if Kabuto did turn bad, Ryo was confident in his ability to kill him without needing a genjutsu such as Izanami. Therefore, Ryo didn't question the matter of Nono taking this child. And let her take him away. Just like in the manga, she named the child Kabuto Yakushi, and took him back to the orphanage. The battlefield was almost cleared, and Minato and Jiraiya came back. In their pursuit, they killed over 2,000 sand ninjas, and Cho's puppets were destroyed by Minato. Hearing that, Sakumo breathed a sigh of relief. After they returned to Konoha camp, Sakumo and Orochimaru wrote their reports on the battle and sent them to the third Hokage. For the meantime, they only needed to stay on standby. A few days after the Battle of Kikyo Pass, the Sand Village surrendered and sent ambassadors to Konoha to sign a peace treaty. Sakumo also received order from the third to immediately return Bunpyaku to Konoha. The Ichibai was subdued by Orochimaru and didn't get to escape. It was sealed within its Jinchuriki by Kushina. A Jinchuriki was a great bargaining card. Of course, Konoha was not going to let go of such an opportunity. Minato used Flying Thunder God and delivered Bunpyaku to the 3 RDS Abnu. Later, the two sides shall discuss the appropriate compensation. As the ones defeated, it would be reasonable for the sand to offer land to the fire country. But such a country, that's mostly desert, would have their people starve to death by giving whatever fertile land they had. Konoha was very aware of this. Konoha's requirements were very simple. From now on, any rewards for any mission performed by the sand would have 20% of its revenue given to Konoha. The sand representative heard the demands with his heart bleeding. Nevertheless, this demand was actually more humane than other alternatives. The sand unwillingly had to agree. At this point, the only two countries still in war with Konoha were the Earth and Water country. After the negotiations ended, the third announced that all of Konoha's ninjas in Kikyo Pass could return to Konoha. Some of these ninjas had been fighting in the Wind country ever since the war began, and hadn't seen their families for over half a decade. So they were eager to return, and couldn't wait to reunite with their families. Sakumo understood their feelings very well, as he hadn't seen Kakashi's mother for a long time. So as soon as he received the 3RDS letter, he held a public meeting in which he announced that everyone shall return to Konoha. Chapter 147, Shisui's Growth. A few days later, Konoha's ninjas returned and the whole village was boiling. The villagers were shouting the names of their new heroes. The most prominent names were those of Minato and Orochimaru. Under unintentional propaganda, the two men's reputation was right behind that of the third. The third, however, was very happy to see this. One of the two was his direct apprentice, and the other was a second-generation disciple as well. He deemed them as worthy inheritors of the will of fire, and it seemed to him that handing over his position of Hokage to either of them was fitting at that moment. Like the hero welcoming spectacles, the third said a few words and then asked the public to let the ninjas go home. When Ryo returned home, he found that Chintz was a little surprised. Her son had been out of the village for only half a month. Nevertheless, she was extremely happy to see her son, and cooked him all sorts of delicious food. Ryo, Chintz, and she started eating, and he told them that the sand had surrendered, and promised to return she to her village rather soon. After eating, Ryo went to find Yujao, but learned from Enko that she was put on mission to hunt down thieves by Orochimaru, and had just set off. Ryo was helpless, he could only go to the Uchiha and look for Shisui. The Uchiha were one of the two most ancient clans in the village. Outsiders who wanted to enter their district had to register with police. When Ryo went there, however, he wasn't questioned. He just left his name, got a pass and went into the district. The Uchiha's district was remote, but their area was quite large, just like a small town. Ryo had no idea where Shisui was, but he remembered his chakra. So, he entered Sage mode, and located him immediately. While in the district, Ryo couldn't just flicker as he wanted, so he walked slowly while perceiving his apprentice's location. Shisui was a remote place, and Ryo walked for a long time before finding himself at the edge of a forest. After confirming that no one was around, Ryo entered the Ice Lightning Chakra mode and quickly flickered to where Shisui was. He found him practicing in the forest. This last battle had left quite the impact on him. The people he was just talking to and laughing with turned into corpses in the blink of an eye. The impact of that shocked him into awakening his Sharingan. After watching him practice for a little while, Ryo decided to test Shisui progress. He separated a shadow clone with 1/10 of his own power, and sent him in. Ryo's own strength, without the use of Sage mode or the Ice Lightning Chakra mode, was only at the level of Quasi-Kage. On top of that, Ryo's ordinary shadow clones could not enter ice elementization, and were thus unable to ice ninjutsu. That, coupled with the clone's chakra, made it at the level of regular Jonin. Shisui was still very vigilant even this long after the war. At the moment that the clone approached with the lightning chakra flickered, he detected him, but didn't react. The clone was a bit surprised. He realized that Shisui found him, so why didn't he hide? The clone flickered in, and while he wasn't in the Ice Lightning Chakra mode, he was very fast. He reached Shisui in an instant, stabbing him directly with a kunao. The still Shisui turned in a crow. A crow? Haha, it seems like Shisui had already gained a lot in this battle. Ryo remembered the strange crow from the manga and laughed. The clone was also shocked by this tactic. He wanted to flicker away, but Shisui didn't give him an opportunity. He flickered to where his was it, and instantly slashed him in half. Wonderful! It seems like this battle had made you grow a lot. Ryo jumped from between the trees praising Shisui. As his sensei, he could see his apprentice achieve such great growth. It invigorated him with a sense of achievement. Seeing Ryo, Shisui immediately realized that this whole matter was just trial from his sensei. He felt a bit embarrassed when he heard him praise him. After that, the two talked about Shisui's feelings after the battle and the gains that he had made. Ryo learned that this battle didn't just awaken Shisui Sharinon, but also made him accidentally come into contact with a summoning contract. The summoning beast he had was a crow. It wasn't a high-level summoned beast. Shisui didn't care much about this. After signing the contract, he put it aside. It wasn't until Shisui tried summoning after the battle. He brought in a crow that was called the Genjutsu Crow. It was born with the ability to use Genjutsu and was special crow that existed in both Genjutsu and reality. He started working with this crow to make a substitute clone that did not require forming hand seals to make. He had other ideas, but he hadn't tried them out yet. The two agreed to meet the next day at the third training ground, and Ryo left the place. While Shisui had been his apprentice for quite some time now, Ryo did not introduce him to Minato and the others yet. So he planned to make everyone get to know him. Early the next morning, Shisui entered the third training ground accompanied with 4 or 5-year-old child. Soon after, Kakashi's trio came, followed by Sakumo, Minato, and Kushina. Ryo was looking for Jiraiya, only to find him at the hot springs as usual, and the two came late. As for Orochimaru, he immediately returned to his cloning experiments as soon as he got back to the village, and Anko was also caught up with him, so Ryo didn't even get to see him since they returned. With everyone at the training ground, Ryo called Shisui, saying to everyone, "This is my apprentice, Shisui Uchiha. Shisui, say hello to everyone." "Hello, I'm Shisui Uchiha, it's my pleasure to meet you all." Shisui was a bit nervous. Standing before him were some of the most prominent people in Konoha. One of the Sunin, Jiraiya, the Kyubi Jinchuriki, Kushina Uzumaki, Konoha's Yellow Flash, Minato Namikaze, Konoha's White Fang, Sakumo Hatake. Facing such people, he could only be nervous. Ryo's disciple? Very good. I'm Sakumo Hatake. Come to me whenever you have any questions about Taijutsu. Being the most senior person of the field, Sakumo spoke first. Jiraiya also expressed his satisfaction with meeting Shisui. As Sakumo promised to help him with Taijutsu, Jiraiya felt he had to be up to the occasion, and promised to teach him about ninjutsu whenever he wanted. Minato smiled and said hello, giving him a flying thunder god kunao. "Ah, Ryo's disciple, this makes like my grandson. Well, I can't give you a gift that's too shabby. I'll give you a seal." Kushina took out a scroll on which was written evil sealing method and handed it to Shisui. Shisui thanked everyone, and now it was time for Kakashi's team. Kakashi gave him a chakra file blade, while Rin gave him a healing stone. Shisui obviously recognized Obito, and the two already had a good relationship. Obito was living alone with his grandmother, and they had no fixed income. He didn't really have anything to give Shisui at hand. But in order to keep himself from being humiliated in front of this crowd, he gave him his own battle saber while biting his teeth. Shisui knew of Obito's financial situation, and he knew even more about his character. He could not refuse, smiled, and accepted Obito's gift. Chapter 148, Important Mission. Seeing that no one treated him differently for being an Uchiha, Shisui breathed a sigh of relief. However, everyone was somewhat curious, how strong is the 9-year-old Shisui? After all, Ryo's first disciple shouldn't be too weak. With that in mind, most of them proposed that he should face Kakashi. Kakashi was already at the level of an elite jonin. Even if this was the 9-year-old Ryo, he would have a hard time beating Kakashi. Ryo didn't object, and nodded for Shisui to start. Against Kakashi, Shisui lost badly, he was still far from beating an elite jonin. Nevertheless, his performance was also astonishing: lightning chakra mode, special body flicker variations, crow replacement clones, and terrifying dojutsu talent at the mere age of 9. "So, I have an eye for talent, don't you think?" Ryo said with a bit of a flamboyant tone. "Well, the kid is good," said Jiraiya seriously. "That is true. In talent, while not comparable to you, he seems to even exceed Kakashi. If all goes well, he'll definitely become Kage tier." Sakumo was also pretty impressed. Minato said nothing, and Kushina was so happy that her apprentice had such a disciple. "Shisui, are you okay?" After seeing Shisui lose to Kakashi, the little boy that accompanied him ran over to him anxiously. "Hey! Isn't that Mikato's son? His name is..." Kushina glanced at the child with Shisui. "Itachi." Minato reminded her. "Yes, it's Itachi." Hearing that name, Ryo immediately turned to the boy. If one asked about the greatest ninja in Naruto, they would get many different opinions. But if they asked about the best brother in Naruto, most would answer without hesitation, Itachi. Itachi was the center of many debates in Ryo's past life, whether or not he could beat Pain, if he could beat Jiraiya with Sage Mode, etc. Ryo thought that Itachi shouldn't be able to beat Jiraiya, let alone Pain. Itachi in Shippuden period was just too ill, and he wasn't even able to form a perfect Susanoo. However, in the data book, he had the same score as Jiraiya. Ryo believed that if he wasn't as ill, the battle between the two could go both ways. As for Pain, the Rinnegan was just too powerful and different. Even Jiraiya couldn't defeat his student as he didn't know his secret before it was too late. However, no matter what, Ryo was still a huge fan of Itachi's character. Like the case of Jiraiya with Naruto, Itachi's main role was that of a guide to his brother. If it wasn't for him, Sasuke wouldn't have returned to the right path. His relationship with Shisui was also explained in the manga, with the latter being his mentor. Ryo didn't want to interfere with Itachi's growth, as he was a perfect ninja to him. He felt that no one should interfere with him. With Itachi around him, Shisui didn't really practice, and the two just returned home after everyone got to know them. 2 days later, Yujao finished her mission and finally returned. On the mission, she had to kill the thief. It was the first time she killed anyone, so she wasn't feel good about that. Ryo did not know how to comfort her. Looking at the unhappy young girl, his mood was down as well. Fortunately, Anko made her feel a lot better. Seeing her in a better mood after a few days, Ryo was finally relieved. At this time, the 3RDS Umbu found Ryo, and reported to him that the third ordered him to immediately go to his office. As the two entered the office together, they found Jiraiya there as well. "I'll cut to the chase. I have an important mission I want you to carry out," said the third seriously. "What's the task?" Jiraiya knew the 3RDS character well, and he knew that he wouldn't act so seriously about a trivial matter. "Jiraiya, Ryo, as you both know, during this war, we managed to make the Sand and the Cloud sign peace treaties with us. Now, we still have to face the Mist and the Rock. Hokage-sama, are you thinking of taking the initiative?" Ryo speculated on the 3RDS intention and asked. "Yes. The plan is to start with the Hidden Rock. But the Mist's situation makes me worried." "The Mist? Old man, are you worried that the Mist might suddenly attack us?" asked Jiraiya. "Well, after all, it was Konoha that killed the third Mizukage. Normally, the fourth Mizukage's first order would be to seek revenge against us. In our current state, even if the Mist attack, we have nothing to fear. Is there anything you're particularly concerned about?" asked Ryo. "Kid, it's not them that we should fear. It's their potential union with the Rock to launch a surprise attack. That could cost us a lot." Jiraiya tried to explain the 3RDS concerns. "I'm not just worried about that. The situation in the Mist Village is too strange, I can't keep my mind of it. That's why, I want the two of you two to sneak into the Mist Village and collect information about their current state." After Jiraiya and Ryo looked at each other, they both accepted this mission. Jiraiya was an expert when it came to gathering intelligence. That, along with Ryo's ice teleportation, should make such a mission really easy for them. This is an S-class mission. You two should remain undetected, and keep this mission's details a secret to anyone outside this meeting room. The third was firm as he gave his final instructions. After leaving his office, Ryo and Jiraiya agreed to leave together on the following morning. Early the next morning, at the gate of the Konoha country, Jiraiya and Ryo started their journey to the water country. Since the previous day, Ryo was thinking about the 3RDS last words, "Keep this mission's details a secret to anyone outside this meeting room." It might just sound like the third was telling them to be secretive, but Ryo kept thinking that something was wrong. Jiraiya was also thinking about this mission being S-class, while being seemingly very normal. The two remained silent on their route, with Ryo worrying mostly about the mission details and the infiltration method that they were to take. After arriving at the Wave Country, Jiraiya said, "Ryo, this time we are posing as Wave Country merchant. After all, the mist is also the center of the water country's trading. Merchants walking in shouldn't look too much out of place. Ryo nodded. He didn't have as much experience as Jiraiya with such missions, so he just did as the Sunin said. Jiraiya changed his clothes with ones he had prepared in advance, and he and Ryo used the transformation jutsu. After getting in disguise, the two looked like two big-belly rich businessmen. With this appearance, Jiraiya went on and found a big sailboat. Jiraiya spent some money on getting the ship and hiring some civilians help with rowing. In the cabin, he had several soldier pills and a lot of water that they brought along from Konoha. This way, after completing the preparations, a merchant ship set off from the wave country. Chapter 149, Sneaking into the Mist Village. The boat traveled the sea for several days before reaching the water country. The country was far from the mainland and surrounded by the sea. It was mainly formed of several islands. Because of its location and lack of communication with the outside world, exchanges with other countries relied on maritime trade. That was the main source of income for the country as well. Because it was surrounded by fish-rich waters, many merchants bartered said fish with all sorts of other goods and necessities. At any given time, dozens of other ships were sailing the sea around Jiraiya's. Because there were just too many ships going in and out of the country, the ninjas responsible of monitoring them were not too serious. They usually just glanced at them then let them pass. Jiraiya's ship entered the water country's territory, and Ryo could see the dense fog-hidden land. The ship docked at the port, with around 50 to 60 other ships docked around it. The shore was also very lively. It was hard to believe that all of this was happening while a war was going on. Jiraiya led by example, and he and Ryo pretended to act like rich men, holding their bellies and marching arrogantly followed by their assistants, and they got off the boat. Just after getting off, a few people with mist forehead protectors surrounded them. Jiraiya told Ryo not to move. The ninjas came and acted very politely, talking with the two casually. As they thought that they were rich merchants, they were acting respectfully. After these ninjas left, Jiraiya said to Ryo, most of the ninjas patrolling here are Chunins, instructed to treat wealthy merchants politely. Why? Shouldn't the businessmen be cautious facing ninjas as they are carrying money? Ryo did not understand. Dummy, these businessmen are the most important source of income for this country. In other words, they are the ones feeding the ninjas. If one of these Chunins happened to offend a businessman with their bad attitude, it could cause huge losses to the water country. Hearing Jiraiya's explanation, Ryo realized that in this country the rich were bossing ninjas around. Civilians were the ones to become ninjas, and the gap between classes kept this way going. The purpose of this trip was to collect information from the Mist Village, so Jiraiya's method was indeed the best and most direct way to sneak in. However, the Mist Village was heavily guarded. Ryo notices some sort of boundary all around it. If the two were to force their way in, they would definitely be discovered. Not just Ryo noticed that, Jiraiya, as a veteran intelligence collector, obviously knew about it. But he didn't seem worried, wandering around the country with Ryo. After making a big lap around, he seemed to learn some things. Then he took Ryo to the biggest hotel near the Mist Village. Ryo also thought about that. After all, hotels are some of the best places to gather information, as they are filled with all kinds of people. However, he didn't expect that they would just sit down in a room, with Jiraiya ordering a full table of food. This is too much. Ryo looked at the dishes on the table. What do you know? Just keep quiet and eat. It won't be long before someone takes us into the Mist Village. Jiraiya said to Ryo. Ryo was a bit confused. But seeing that Jiraiya was confident, he didn't object again, and just took chopsticks and started eating. Jiraiya had ordered the most expensive dishes on the menu, and the water country, being rich in seafood, had great seafood dishes. Ryo in his past life was from the north. In this life, he had eaten a lot of seafood in Konoha, but hadn't tasted such good seafood ever since crossing to this world. Jiraiya let him eat, so he wasn't about to act polite. So many things have been ordered, things that are too expensive. The hotel owner was thrilled, as such good guests are rare. Of course, the owner himself was no poor, being able to open such a large hotel. This hotel actually had quite the reputation in the water country, as it was specialized in receiving distinguished guests. Nevertheless, such generous guests were still rare. So, the hotel owner personally went upstairs, planning to say hello to the businessmen. Knock knock. Jiraiya looked at the feasting Ryo, signaling him to continue, and then said, "Please come in." The owner pushed the door and entered. He looked at the starving Ryo with surprise before looking away, before sitting in front of his two guests. Ryo gave him a look full of disdain, and the owner felt that Ryo was indeed no ordinary person. "Hello and welcome my guests. I'm the owner of this hotel, Yamada Nagakyu." The owner greeted the two. Jiraiya looked back at him and squeezed out a smile. He said faintly, "Yamanada Dano, I'm Sanfune." "Oh Sanfune-san, I don't recognize the name, where are you from?" The owner proceeded to ask. "I'm Groom the Iron Country, and my fellow here is from the Rain Country." Hearing the names of those countries, Yamada breathed a sigh of relief. Those countries were not in war with his, so they can make good deals in here. The two continued to talk about the Iron Country's geographical location, customs, military politics, etc. Everything Jiraiya said was consistent with what Yamada knew about the Iron Country. So the latter went for one final question. "Sanfune-san, it is also said that during the Second World War, the general of the Land of Iron once defeated the legendary Hanzo of the Salamander, one don't know if this is." "Hey!" Jiraiya put on an angry face and stood up saying, "I don't know where you got such rumors. For a samurai, pride is more important than life. Mifune-sama lost to Hanzo, and never claimed otherwise. He just survived. You should not listen so such heinous rumors that insult Mifune-sama's reputation." Thinking that Jiraiya was really angry, Yamada quickly said, "I'm sorry, Sanfune-san. It's just a thing I heard, please don't be angry." Seeing Jiraiya's reaction and behavior, Yamada completely believed his identity. After finally appeasing the furious Jiraiya, Yamada quickly asked his about what he wanted to buy. Jiraiya didn't hesitate to say that the purpose of this trip was to buy rare metals used to craft Kubikaribasho. Yamada was stunned. He knew that this was a big customer, but he just didn't expect him to be thing big. He felt that this was an opportunity. He knew the metal used to forge that blade and that there were still some reserves of it in the Mist Village. He also knew that they wanted to sell some of them. Thinking of that, Yamada quickly said, "Sanfune-san, I know the right place for you to go. I can give you a referral to help you make this purchase." "But the money?" Jiraiya put on a doubtful look, and stared at Yamada for quite some time. Then, he hesitantly took out a few bags and opened the smallest one. Yamada had seen many gems during his lifetime, and at the first glance he could recognize that these were very valuable. "After the purchase is complete, this will be yours." Jiraiya acted a bit regretful. Hearing that sentence, Yamada got all excited, and immediately promised ensuring the success of this trade. Chapter 150, The Eyes in the Dark. Later, as planned, Yamada contacted people in the village, and then led Jiraiya and Ryo inside. While he was making his contacts, Ryo used that time to make a teleportation barrier mark. On their way in, he linked his mind to Jiraiya, who explained how his plan went to him along the way. As soon as the two initially arrived at the port, Jiraiya noticed the barrier outside the village. It was clear to him that they should not force through. Once they would break the barrier, they will be discovered. So he just started wandering around, and it was all for the sake of collecting information. He learned from the chatter of the people around that the hotel right besides village had a very high reputation. He also heard that the Mist had wanted to sell some of the metal used to forge Kubikaribasho. Using all that information, he decided to spend large sum of money at the hotel to lure in the owner, get his trust, and enter the Mist Village. Ryo was stunned hearing this. Is this the usual greedy perv he always knew? Because of the link between their minds, Jiraiya heard that thought, and hit Ryo's back stealthily, before continuing to talk about their next plan. Jiraiya was thinking of getting acquainted with some people in the village, while Ryo goes around hearing chatter and gathering information. But when the two entered the village, they discovered that such tactics should not really work. It was because of the strange mood in the village. Everyone was in a hurry. They didn't even say hello or greet each other, let alone chat. "Hey Jiraiya-san, this doesn't look good," Ryo said to Jiraiya. "I didn't think that the village would be like this. It's like the old man said, this village has problems. What should we do? This way, we're not getting anywhere." "Don't worry, I'll find a way. Don't talk too much," Jiraiya said with a serious tone. Yamada, who was leading the way, looked back and found that two didn't look right, as they were looking at their surroundings helplessly. Don't be nervous. There have been some things happening in the village recently. This will not affect the purchase, be relieved. He tried to calm them down. Do you know what's going on? This mood is too oppressive, almost makes me feel out of breath. Jiraiya tried to make Yamada talk. I'm sorry, it's a private matter of our village, you should not ask. Yamada hesitated, but did not disclose any information. Jiraiya didn't ask again, and continued to follow Yamada to a two-flood building in the Mist Village. On the second floor, an old man, seemingly 50 to 60 years old, was already waiting. I'll introduce, this is the elder consultant of our village, Qing Yuki. Qing Yuki-san, these are the people who want to buy the metal. After introducing the two sides to each other, Yamada sat down. Ryo, is there any way you could put this old man under the effect of Jinjutsu? Said Jiraiya telepathically. Genjutsu? Jiraiya-san, do you want me to put these two under the effect of Genjutsu, and then use our Yamanaka clan's techniques to read through their memories? Well, this is the only solution I see. Otherwise, with the village's current state, we won't be able to collect any useful information at all. Try, and if we fail, we'll just give up the task and use your teleportation barrier to escape. Jiraiya did seem desperate, and Ryo didn't hesitate, opening up his Sharingan. Last time he faced a Yuki, Ryo used the Sharingan to copy his techniques. However, this was actually the first time Ryo used the Sharingan's Genjutsu in a mission. If he succeeds, things should very well. Fortunately, he did. Ryo's spiritual power was too strong, and Qing's wasn't expecting being targeted by Genjutsu, so he was successfully caught in an illusion. Ryo immediately turned back to Yamada and did the same, and the common man held no chance against a Sharingan's Genjutsu. He was easily controlled by Ryo. Time was tight, and Ryo didn't know how long his Genjutsu should last. So he immediately started using his clan's techniques. There were too many memories in Qing's mind, with a lot of them being very valuable. Even though he found memories about ice jutsus, Ryo could only give up on reading them, and start looking for the most recent one. A few minutes later, he found them. After reading them, Ryo understood what happened to the village. It turned out that after the death of the third Mizukage, many people in the village fought to become the fourth. The Mist Village has always worshipped strength. In the end, Yagura was the one to win the position of fourth Mizukage, and his first order was implementing martial law in the whole village. Because the previous Sanbai Jinchuriki was dying, and Yagura was the only one who could control it, the Sanbai Jinchuriki could only be him. Therefore, he forced the martial law in the village to ensure that the transfer of the Biju proceeds smoothly. After learning that, Ryo left Qing's mind, and after notifying Jiraiya, he dispelled the Genjutsu he used. Genjutsu can lead to disrupting the chakra flow in one's body. Qing felt problems with his chakra circulation, and stood up immediately, staring at the two in front of him. However, after seeing fist-sized gems in front of him, he immediately sat down and continued doing business. After the purchase was completed, Ryo and Jiraiya left the village and returned to the hotel with Yamada. Neither of them noticed that Yamada had a strange smile as he walked away. In a hole 1,000 miles away, a white-haired skinny-bodied old man had his eyes closed. The man looked as if his life was a candle in the wind, about to be extinguished at any moment. Even so, his presence had great pressure. Madara-sama, a white figure suddenly sprouted out of the ground calling the old man. The old man's eyes suddenly opened, showing a pair of scarlet three-tomo Sharingan. Mad. Madara-sama, I have something. I want to tell you. The white figure was absolutely frightened in front of the old man. What is it, White? Madara toned down his bloodthirst, and faintly asked. Madara-sama, we found Jiraiya and Ryo Yamanaka in the water country. What were they doing there? Madara asked. According to the one faking to be Yamada Nagaku, they are collecting information on the state of the village. Should anything be done? No, let them leave. They won't influence our plan. For now, controlling Yagura is the most important thing. After finishing his words, Madara closed his eyes again. After getting his instructions, White Zetsu sneaked into the water country.